Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and we got a World War III alert. But be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe, let everybody know Cult Figure live. The NATO and the United States definitely have wrote a check that they ass can't cash. They're hiding out, but there's nowhere to hide. The defenses is being penetrated, and we are maybe hours or minutes away from the Big Bang. But let's just start off with looking at what exactly happened to Israel this morning. For Hezbollah was making sure they were as vulnerable as they need to be.
The footage shows Hezbollah resistance drones flying comfortably in the skies of Nahariya until they reach the settlement of Akka and hitting the Israeli-occupied territories. In the morning of August 6, 2024, at least 2 drones flew casually through the entire Israeli defense system.
Now, that's really a bad sign, because all they've been telling us about is Iran is going to strike any day now, any hour now, any moment now. Oh, really? Well, I reported last night that several U.S. soldiers were attacked in Iraq. They didn't have their air defense systems working properly enough. Now, Hezbollah testing them this morning, injured a bunch of casualties in Israel as their drone was able to just penetrate. Now, if they just penetrating the air defense system so easily, what's going to happen when the Big Bang starts?
And managed to hit their targets. Hezbollah said, this was a response to the killing of Radwan Forces commander yesterday. 4 Hezbollah fighters were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a command center in southern Lebanon. This is not the main response, Hezbollah insists.
It's a little slap to the face. Something that never happened. Nobody's ever witnessed anything like this happening to Israel. In no war has Israel ever fought have their defenses been penetrated like this, and they have been forced to flee northern Israel. But that's not the point. What Hezbollah is showing everybody is, we've been warning you something big is coming. And when I threw the left jab at you, you wasn't ready for that. You're not ready for the right. They in big trouble over there right now.
The new scene today is the nearby location, where Shraga military base north of Akka was hit by the first drone attack due to penetrating deep into the occupied territories without interception. Scenes of panic ensued due to the outbreak of fire that was still increasing inside the facility and the sight of smoke rising high, even as they were on high alert awaiting retaliation. This created chaos here, where footage...
One thing that they found out is those air defense systems that the United States has built, the Patriot system, that Israel has built, this Iron Dome system, they wasn't built for these drones that's being sent at them. They were built for ballistic missiles and things of that nature. You see, you got to adapt in warfare.
Documents the damage and a number of cars engulfed in flames.
So they're in big trouble. They're in big trouble. If Iran could send a swarm of 5,000 drones, Iran could send 10,000 drones at them right now. Hezbollah can all together to access. What they gonna do to access send 15,000 drones? They will be devastated. Hold on. Salute to our brother here in the building. Salute, family. Our brother Curtis Mitchell for the donation to the war chest. He say salute to you, brother. I appreciate the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. But they was testing Israelis and the U.S.
Footage shows the moment of the direct collapse of the first drone launch, hitting and impacting a settler's car.
Come on, man. That drone just flying through the air. They scared to death, though, because this is what they do to Hamas. But Hezbollah already been warning them, if you fight us, it's going to be way different than Hamas.
or the fall of explosives on it, causing injuries to those inside on Highway 4 between Nahariya, Akka. The Israel Defense Forces announced that the explosion caused serious injuries to an adult male and was previously believed to have been caused by a Hezbollah Shahed 101 attack drone, but was actually
tanks. Them tanks and these planes, those are the aircraft carriers. Those are really weapons of the past. You need them, but it's in this new warfare. No, you need drones. You need drones. Drone warfare is the warfare. And the bad thing about that for the West, their enemies has mastered drone warfare. Their enemies has mastered drone warfare. Iran has mastered drone warfare. How was Russia able to quickly devastate Ukraine? The whole world was talking about it. The Iranian drones. Look what Hezbollah is doing to Israel right now. Drone warfare. Hezbollah don't have no airplanes, but they got drones. So Israel can bomb them, and they can bomb Israel.
Caused by a Tamir interceptor missile launched from a nearby Iron Dome surface to air battery that malfunctioned.
So what do we oh yeah, okay, here it was. Just one. I was looking for this. Okay. Now, so we just seen Revolutionary Salute Queen. We just seen Israel attacked, failed to intercept the drones. Citizens horrified as the drone attacks happened. And it's not the big one. This is them looking for weaknesses in the air defense systems, and they successfully finding them. So that's what happened to Israel this morning. What did I report on last night? The revolutionaries looking for the weaknesses in the U.S. air defense system.
Footage shows the moment
and they found them.
Attack struck the Ain al-Assad air base, a proxy outpost of the U.S. and Allied occupation forces in Anbar province, western Iraq. The night of August 5, 2024, was marked by panic and a dangerous atmosphere as the attack drones and Katyusha rockets, fired by Iraqi resistance group responsible, caused fires and smoke to billow at the facility. Video shows the vehicles reportedly used to launch the rockets.
Now, when I saw those, I was like, wow. All right, because those are new. What did I just say? In war, you got to adapt. See, the revolutionaries, they not sitting in one place and launching them at the U.S. anymore because they know the U.S. will blow up the spot where you at. So what? They got launch trucks they have made now. They done made launch trucks. Do you know they can make thousands of those trucks? Thousands of launch trucks. Launch the rocket at you, and then they gone. They don't care if you blow this up. These revolutionists, see, the U.S. done got themselves into something they're not prepared for. So what we found out happened last night? Well, they used one of their launch trucks. Who did this? Who knows?
The CRAM system, rocket defenses, artillery and mortars, desperately repelled the attack, intercepting what appeared to be, but Al-Mayadeen reported that 3 explosions were heard and landed on the base itself. The shadow of uncertainty still hangs over the area, as casualties and damage remain shrouded in mystery. However, the U.S. Department of Defense confirmed on Tuesday morning that several of its soldiers were wounded in the attack, and said it was assessing the extent of the damage. Officials said at least 5 American personnel were seriously injured, and the casualty toll is still preliminary and subject to change. Meanwhile, the revolutionaries in Iraq have confirmed that they targeted the base with several missiles and drones that night, and said that they will use advanced capabilities and will continue until the last U.S. soldier leaves Iraq.
we can see the revolutionaries already started softening them up. They attacked the U.S. base in Iraq. People got hit. People injured. They attacked Israel with drones. People got hit. Bases got injured. Bases got hit. People were injured. The emperor has no clothes. I mean, they sending most soldiers over there, but they sending them over there to do what?
By Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank members FDIC, terms and conditions apply. Well, thousands of sailors and soldiers, American sailors and soldiers, are being sent towards Israel in preparation for World War III, which could happen at any moment. A coming war with Iran that, of course, Israel desperately wants. Benjamin Netanyahu has told us many times in front of Congress that he desperately wants the United States to take out Iran, as we've done in Libya and Iraq. Iran was the third one on his list that he wants us to do that. So should Americans die for Israel's war against Iran? Are we about to see a massive false flag operation that would harm American soldiers? Former CIA agent Larry Johnson joins us now. He has been outspoken on this from the very beginning, that Americans should not be involved in this and we should not be there. And he joins us now. Larry, great to see you. It seems like we're on the precipice.
Yeah, we're staring World War III in the face. This is alarming. The movement of U.S. forces that's underway tells you that the movement of these forces is not a reaction to what happened. It was pre-planned. In other words, because this is not like you call up Domino's and order a pizza. Hey, I need a pepperoni in 30 minutes, and they whip it up and deliver it. First of all, you got all these sailors and Marines that have to be alerted to get on board ships, and those ships have to be stocked and supplied. They're not. Some are sitting there ready to go, but some aren't. If they're being, if they've been out at sea. So the fact that you've now got 3 carrier task force groups moving into that region, plus the one that caught my eye was the announcement that you had this Marine. It's basically a Marine Expeditionary Unit, what they call a MU. That's a package of about 4,000 Marines, and their job to do what they call non-combatant evacuation operations. So, or a NEO, dump all the military acronyms on you. So we got the MU doing the NEO, and the NEO is there for, excuse me, people like in Lebanon or in Israel who can't get out because all the airports are shut. This will allow those ships to go in and load up American citizens and others wanting to flee the region. So that was pre-positioned. I mean, that's what caught my eye. That I think that my own view is there's a preemptive war coming, and it's going to be struck by the West, not by Iran.
Well, as we see this too. We also have reporting today from Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com. Israel considering a preemptive strike against Iran. So this sort of preemption, this idea that they are going to attack and we need to be out in front of this. I think this is really scary for a lot of Americans who are familiar with false flag attacks. I felt like dusting off my USS Liberty hat to wear for this segment today, to remind Americans the last time in 1967 when U.S. sailors were sat right there and used as target practice, killed by Israel, attacked by Israel in order to draw the United States into a war against Egypt. Of course, your old organization, the CIA, was actively involved in that, of course, we know. But so are we about to see another USS Liberty false flag operation using American soldiers and sailors sitting there on American aircraft carriers in order to draw us into a war against Iran? What is your sense of that? Or because we're calling it out, maybe we won't have it happen.
So much a false flag as it is that Israel's sort of not schizophrenic politically, militarily. On the one hand, they carry out this pre-planned assassination of the lead negotiator in Tehran. So it's a clear violation of international law. It's a terrorist act. That's what it is. If Iran had done that to Israel, we'd be calling it international terrorism. So let's call it what it is. It was a terrorist attack by Israel. And Israel's been guilty of several terrorist attacks in Iran, but we just don't call them that. Plus, the United States has been backing a group called the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Haq, who is MEK. They were on our terrorist list when I was working the issue. You know, they were sort of a Marxist, it sounds crazy, a Marxist Islamist group, but they were radical against the Shia Islamists that took over Iran. We took them off the list and started giving them money, for God's sake. So we back terrorists in the United States. So here it is, Israel conducts this terrorist attack, and then Iran says it's going to retaliate, and then Israel goes, well, by God, we're going to preempt that retaliation. So they're trying to play the victim while they're also the aggressor. They're both in this case. Right. Wild card here that makes it so dangerous is the fact that Iran has at least a 5-year mutual defense relationship with Russia and China. They started conducting their first joint military exercises in 2019. Now, and that to conduct that in 2019 meant that they started planning for it in like 2018. Well, you had Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister, who's now sort of Putin's national security advisor, personal advisor. He went to Tehran 2 days ago. There have been significant airlift traffic between Moscow and Iran. The speculation is that it's bringing in electronic warfare capabilities. It's also probably bringing
Putin already warned them. Putin already warned them, man. Putin totally. See, one thing about Putin, they didn't hack his phone. They didn't catch him, hack China's phone and find them talking about this. They didn't. Putin told the whole world that he was going to start sending the enemies of NATO and America advanced weapons to fight them with for what they had done in Ukraine. So if the U.S. come out and run their mouth about we're going to be helping Israel, Putin couldn't wait to send those advanced weapons to Iran. And they ain't hiding it. Yes, their cargo planes is landing in Iran, the biggest military cargo planes in the world. What you think is in there? He couldn't wait to do this. He can't wait. So they want Putin, the only man in the world right now, he don't want things to calm down. He wants this to escalate because there's only one way to deal with these bullies, and it's to destroy them. He wants this. So do Iran and so do Hezbollah. I mean, it's no avoiding where we're at right now.
You've got Shoigu consulting with the Iranians on both trying to understand what they're going to do, understand what they'll do, make sure that it doesn't necessarily get out of control. But
bullshit
with the United States moving aircraft carriers,
I don't know down about that.
The only message that Iran can take out of there is they're preparing. The United States is preparing to launch airstrikes in Iran.
Those planes.
So the United States launches airstrikes in Iran. What then does Russia do in response? Russia there, of course, you mentioned meeting in Tehran. I mean, is this where World War III begins? Is in the Middle East. It doesn't happen on the battlefield in Ukraine. It doesn't happen in Africa, where we've come face to face with Russian soldiers. It happens in the Middle East.
Wherever they want.
Yeah, no, potentially. I mean, that's what we're living through a period. I'm approaching 70 years of age, so I'm an old guy. This never been this dangerous, this fraught with peril.
Come on, man.
And
telling people,
even the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because adding to these tensions in the Middle East, with the likelihood that Iran is going to hit Israel and hit Israel hard this time, the United States is going to try to do what it can to stop some of the inbound drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. But in response to that, any attacks upon a Russian asset will elicit a Russian military response. The American people don't realize that over the last 8 years, the Russians have shot down in Syria about 5 U.S. drones. We're not talking Syrians shooting them down. We're talking the Russians have shot them down because the U.S. drones, Predator drones, have strayed into territory that the Russians said, hey, this is ours. You come into our territory, you're ours. Shot them down. We haven't heard a word about that, but that's what that's been going on behind the scenes. So Russia has vowed that it's going to equip people like the Iranians or the Houthis with weapons that can hit U.S. assets in response to what the United States has done by equipping Ukraine to hit and kill Russian citizens. So we're entering a new level of conflict.
So for people that watch and they say, well, you know, any sort of dissent, any sort of saying that Americans shouldn't go and die for Israel is anti-Semitic. That's my favorite. I mean, that is the dumbest of all statements, right? But I just cannot wrap my head around how anyone could justify, if you're a United States citizen, if you're an American, what benefit you would get for the United States of America to go and die and fight for Israel, or go and die and fight in the Middle East against Iran and getting dragged into a massive regional war. What benefit does the United States have by going there and dying for this cause?
Well, it's not, and let's be specific about the cause we're being asked to die for. This is not about defending freedom. This is not about preventing Jews from being executed in gas chambers. This is about a group of people, these radical Zionists that are represented by the likes of just not only Bibi Netanyahu, but Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. These people call for and celebrate the rape of Palestinians. I mean, literally raping them. They said that they're entitled to do that. They storm prisons and want to rape, you know, using both brooms as well as themselves to violate Palestinian men, Palestinian women. I mean, it's sickening. It is, yes, it's controversial to say, but this is this group of Zionists, because I don't want to call them Israelis, because there are a number of Israelis that oppose this and that speak out in opposition to it. But these extreme Zionists represent the very thing that they claimed that they were fighting against in World War II. They're acting and behaving like Nazis, like the SS camp guards in terms of their treatment of prisoners, their wanton execution of women and children. It's horrific. And so, no, America shouldn't stand for that at all. And yet, what we have, as you've reported several times on your show, the money machine from the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the AIPAC, has been pouring money in to defeat candidates that are not genuflecting before the blue and white flag of Israel.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And well, that's why there's tens of thousands of people protesting in Tel Aviv against these radical Zionists, against the Netanyahu regime. Right. But the Western media will not cover that story at all, of course. They won't cover that story, but we will. And Larry Johnson is always great to have on the show and really shed some truth on us a little bit. Larry, great to see you.
Have you ever asked yourself why these people fight each other? Why are there so many wars, in the world? Why so many wars? Why never-ending wars? It's just insane. Why can't people just be happy together, live together, respect one another, like no boundaries and just be okay? I find it crazy. I find it absolutely crazy. Somebody must be eating out of war. Like, no, come on. Somebody must be benefiting out of this, because it makes no sense that the whole nation can come together, gear up, and go die. Doesn't make sense. What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing good. It's a beautiful day. Look at me moving around with the microphone because I have to deliver to you. I appreciate you very much. Thank you very much to you for choosing us. I choose you because I love you. You're my people. If you don't think I'm your people, you can move out. You can change videos. Anyway, so it's happening in Iran. Russia is delivering weapons. So basically, Russia is delivering radars and defense missiles. These are solar air missiles for defense measures. Okay, why? Because we know exactly what's happening in Iran. They're not very much liked by America and the country that you don't name. There's a country that you don't name. If you name that country, unfortunately, your videos will be shadow banned. And by shadow banning,
so these air defense systems that Russia is sending, What type of air defense systems? Well, I don't know particularly, but this is what I do know. I do remember Putin laughing in Syria when Trump was threatening to destroy Syria because he said that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, the revolutionary, long live Assad, that he was murdering his own people. That was a lie. He was fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda. But they, Barack Obama and then Trump came into power too. They was killing the Christians. But Putin stepped in, and Putin said that he would have to demonstrate to the West, and especially the U.S., there was no such thing as an invisible plane. And a lot of people were shocked when he made that statement because the U.S., their hustle they like to sell to the world is stealth drones, stealth planes. And I remember never forgetting Putin telling the whole world, there's no such thing as a visible plane. We see everything. So what they're doing is he's telling Israel and he's telling America, there's no such thing as a visible plane. We see everything. Before you come to Iran, you better know they're going to make sure Iran see everything. Any plane.
I mean, the video will slow down. It's not, let's say you have 1 million followers. The video will only be delivered to 3,000, not 1 million. Unfortunately, there are some countries you don't speak about them. You don't talk about them. It's just very sad. I don't know how equal the world is. But anyway, that's the case. Let's get back on track. Russia has started delivering of weapons, defense weapons for Iran. These defensive defense missiles for protection of the airspace of Iran. We know exactly what happened. This happened after a couple of days. We know that the country that you don't name hit inside Iran. They were targeting a prominent leader of Ham. You can't even say that. If you say that, they just target you. You know what I mean? So this prominent person of this group was in Iran to go celebrate the new president of Iran, because Iran's president a few weeks ago passed. So they have a new president. Now, the leader of this group that begins with the H, Ham, went into Iran to go and celebrate the new president. Now, this group is not very much liked by the country that you don't name. I'm sorry, fellas. Yeah, that's the only way we can deliver a message. The country that you don't name doesn't like this group because they don't like each other due to centuries of stories. The leader of this group that begins with the H went to Iran, one of the most prominent person. After going to Iran, the country you don't name sent a drone with something with it, and it's boom. And that person was finished with his bodyguard. Now, Iran is infuriated about that. Like, we can understand you targeting whoever you want to target in their country, but you don't target whoever you're targeting in my house. It's like you're fighting with somebody in the street, okay? You don't like each other. When that person happens to run in my house, then you come to my house and start throwing stones and break glasses. Would you do that to somebody's house that you respect? Like, would you go, let's say, the neighbor's house, and you respect the neighbor because he's a good man? If somebody ran into the neighbor's house and he was throwing stones at you, would you throw the stones? You probably wouldn't, because you respect the neighbor at least. Now, if you throw the stones at the neighbor's house, it means you don't have respect for the neighbor. So the neighbor, in some way, if you don't like each other, especially, would want to show you, dude, you're not going to do that. Not in my house. I'm not going to allow this. Now, the Americans have said Iran is about to respond. They're going to do something about it. They're not going to let this just, no, they're not going to let that. And why will they not let that just flow? Because if you let somebody touch you in an inappropriate way for the first time, you're just giving them a visa to do it again and again and again. There must be a limit. And this is valid to any other relationship. If somebody disrespects you in a way that you don't like, you need to call them to it. You need to say, hey, I'm not going to tolerate this. Because if you do not do anything about that, what's going to happen is it's going to reoccur. It's going to be the way they act towards you. And let alone, they're going to make it much bigger. So Iran is about to respond. Everybody knows that. Americans have sent a warship very close by, saying they're going to defend their friends. Okay, they're going to defend their friend, even though their friend hits inside Iran. Now, we also know that a while back, the country that you don't name hit somebody in Syria. Okay, they hit the embassy of Iran in Syria, And Iran replied. Iran hit them back because you normally international laws say you cannot hit somebody's embassy. You can't do that because hitting somebody's embassy is like you hitting them in their land. You have no right to do that. That's against international laws. And Iran had to reply to that. Iran threw stuff, threw missiles, drones, and many other things to them. But they responded in a way that was not big enough not to inflame the area. They didn't want to create a real war. They just wanted to respond in a way to show them that we can reach out to you, we can reach you, we can target you. So they threw things, rockets, easy, slow missiles, which will be interfered or intercepted, stopped by the country you don't name. The goal was let just send them things, but let not do too much damage, because if they done too much damage, it would have turned into a big war. But they responded. While they were shooting at them, obviously Americans' ships in the neighborhood were also bombarding those things, trying to shop. They tried to help each other. But now we know the country that you don't name has a very good friend. That's the United States of America. They have full access. So if they go to war, America will go to war with them. That's a reassurance for them. Iran is not alone anymore. That's the dangerous part, because Russians have come close to Iran. And because most of the Western nations have turned their back to Russia, Russia needs allies. Russia needs people that are reliable he can turn to in case things go south. So you need to make correspondence and friendship with Iran. Even though they're all part of BRICS, Russia is supplying right now stuff that Iran needs for its defense. Now, another thing is Turkey has also come forward. Turkey has also spoke very negatively toward the country you don't name, and especially the leader, saying he's very similar to that guy that finished people in Germany. He said there's no difference between him and the guy in Germany. That's what Turkey president said.
Just as 85 years ago, Hitler's Nazi parliament in Reichstag, during the genocide talk, those who gave a standing ovation to him are written in the history with shame. And those who gave a standing ovation to the lies of Netanyahu, the Hitler of today, will not be able to wash off the black stain on their hands for the rest of their lives.
He's very aggravated about that. Now, Turkey is the biggest army after the United States of America in terms of effective. So they are vicious, and they have a long history of thousands of years of war. They're not afraid. Now, this is exactly what's happening. Now, Iran has got support from Russia, from Turkey, and obviously Russia has support from China. Are we going very close to something very, very big? Now, the question is very simple, Phil. Why are they fighting? Why the need to go into somebody else's country and go finish somebody? I mean, couldn't you wait for him to come out or something? Land somewhere else? Is that a way to show them maybe we are strong enough to actually take out somebody very important in your country? Is that the message that we're trying to send? It has to be calculated. You must think well enough before you do such thing. Like, what are the gains of me hitting somebody in a country where they could be bombing us? Unless you want to show them, you know what, we actually have the technology to hit you personally in your country. So be careful. Is this right? My question again is this one. Is it okay that America supports them in spite of everything that they do? In Africa, Mali was hit by Ukrainians. They claimed it. They supported the enemies of Malians to hit Mali, and nobody made a noise about that. Now, Africans have not reacted. They have not come together. They have not spoken with one voice saying, no, we understand you and Russia have issues in Russia or in Ukraine, but don't bring your issues in Africa. Africans have not spoken. But if you dare do anything similar to Europe, all Europeans will come together. Let me remind you, when Russia attacked Ukraine, all Europeans came together against Russia. They didn't ask who started, how did this start? No. The simple fact that Russian boots were on Ukraine, all Europeans came together against Russia. Why can't Africans do that? When an African country is clearly being undermined by a European country, a Ukrainian country. With all due respect, we understand what's happening in Ukraine. We respect their fight. But that doesn't mean you have to attack Russians in African soil. For what? And taking African lives. Why can't Africans speak with the same voice? The country that you don't name always have support, unconditional support from the United States of America. Clearly. Now, why can't Africans do the same? It doesn't matter whether the country that you don't name has done wrong or good. America will always, forever be behind them. Why can't Africans do the same for each other? I don't understand. Why is it easier for Europeans to come to countries in Africa? Go to Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Guinea, Nigeria, travel to Tanzania with no issues. Even if his papers are not correct, you will never have issues. But you're an African day to day. Why do you need visas to go to your neighboring country? And sometimes you don't have visa or you overstay. They will throw you in jail, if not make you pay a lot of money. Why is that? I don't understand. Let me know how you feel about this. It was a great pleasure. God bless.
The Russians have gone to Iran. Shoigu, who used to be the defense minister, he recently took on the role of the head of the Security Council in Russia. Basically, the Russian equivalent of a National Security Council, same thing, right? And he's just landed in Iran and is there to accompany a bunch of weapons that have been shipped to the Iranians. So there's nothing irregular or weird about the Russians giving Iran weapons. They exchange weapons all the time. We know that, for example, a lot of Russian drones were originally Iranian drones. We know they have security agreements. There's nothing, there's nothing necessarily escalatory about this. Russia is allowed to deliver weapons to Iran, just like America delivers weapons to Ukraine and to Israel. Okay, fair is fair. So, nevertheless, these huge cargo planes taking off at this time, it looks like it's some special equipment. For me, we're looking at this and seeing not just the cargo planes arriving, but also Shoigu in person. To me, it indicates that the Russians are giving the Iranians some kind of advanced weapon system, or they're basically replenishing their stocks. They're making this, diplomatically, I know it's a military matter, but diplomatically speaking, it's a message to the Israelis and the Americans. It's a message to the Israelis that retaliation is coming and retaliation is going to be big. And it's a message to the Americans that you went and gave Ukraine massive amounts of weapons. You gave them some of your most advanced weapon systems and you allowed them to strike inside Russia. You also probably had something to do with Russian Wagner troops being killed in Mali, right? I was talking about that just recently. Mali broke off ties with Ukraine because Ukraine admitted to it. So, and again, Ukrainian intelligence, I'm sorry, the Americans and French have intelligence in Mali, not the Ukrainians. It's just Ukraine helped maybe pass it on. In any case, it's a message from both Russia and Iran to America and Israel, respectively, that, you want to play this game, we can play it too, all right? Russia is also able to give Iran advanced weapon systems and piss you off in your theater of war or in your other theater of war in the Middle East. So, I wouldn't understate or overlook this visit by Shoigu in any sense of the imagination. So these are the cargo planes that have been traveling to Tehran, these IL-76s, massive beasts. And, these are obviously military carriers. Now, at the same time, here's the video, by the way, just of Shoigu in Iran. What's really funny is that Reuters and some other Western outlets are reporting that Shoigu was sent by Putin to tell the Iranians to calm down and not to strike back too hard and, temper themselves. And I just find this so funny because the Russians didn't say anything. It's once again, it's like, a story entirely based on anonymous officials. And again, there's nothing wrong necessarily with having a story based on that, but given the track record of the New York Times and their constant lying, and we know they're a mouthpiece for the Israelis and the Americans, so how serious can you take that? Besides, you don't send cargo planes full of weapons and the head of the Security Council all the way to Tehran just to say, please don't strike Israeli settlers. You would normally send a simple diplomatic cable or a diplomat in the worst case, if that were true, which it's not. At the same time, you've got the head of CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, in occupied Palestine, meeting with the Israelis. So, like I said, it's tit for tat, okay? The Americans want to do that. Okay, we can do the same thing. You have to understand this. There's a certain finesse, which sounds really funny in this context, given it's just war and violence. But there's a certain finesse to the symbolism, to the meanings of moves like this. I mean, they don't make no mistake. They're not just going there for show or to send a diplomatic message. They're going there really to cooperate on military matters. But they understand the meaning of this, and they understand how it's going to be interpreted. There are people who work in the American government who are looking at this, and they report this to their superiors and notify them, because it is significant. It's not a random visit. So I'm painting a broad picture for you to understand what's happening. What are Hezbollah saying? What violations did Israel commit? What is happening in terms of preparing for a response? What are the Israelis doing? Building, preparing bunkers for Netanyahu. They're opening bunkers for the public in Tel Aviv, which indicates that the Israelis are expecting civilian or perhaps civilian structures, not necessarily lives, to be hit, or their cities to be hit, like Yemen did with its drones in Tel Aviv, just a few weeks ago. They're not just thinking, oh, it's going to be a bunch of drones in Eilat. Oh no, it's going to be much more than that. And what are the Russians doing, to help Iran and therefore help the axis of resistance? Because remember, in this time, in this context, it's not just a random weapons shipment. Let me make no mistake. But this guy, really, this ghoul in the State Department, he really makes me laugh. Miller is really such a funny person. He's really just like, they're jokes. At the same time, this is just now, the Iraqis have hit the Ain al-Assad base in Iraq. So again, this is an occupation base. The Americans are stationed there with other allied troops, and it seems that 2 American soldiers were just killed and 5 wounded. Definitely wounded, although the 2 killed is still unconfirmed. The Iraqi resistance fired a bunch of Katyusha rockets, and afterwards it seems there was a missile attack in addition to that. People are thinking, is this the response that's coming from the resistance? No, it's not. Yesterday, Hezbollah fired a barrage of rockets at the Israelis, and people also think, oh, is that the response? No, these are farts. I mean, come on. When the response happens, you will know. I promise you'll know. And I don't think the Iranians, and I say Iranians because they're the furthest away geographically, I don't think they're going to be firing drones this time. I could be wrong. I'm just saying because they take a long time to arrive, and it gives the Israelis time to prepare, and that voids the entire point of a studied response or a meaningful, impactful response to reestablish deterrence. You want to fire ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles that are going to be there, very, very soon, and take a few minutes and not hours compared to cruise missiles and drones. Some of the drones, I mean, depending on where you fire them from in Iran, they could take 12 hours, So it gives the Israelis time to prepare, and that voids the entire point.
So the Americans have deployed the USS Abraham Lincoln, and that naturally comes with all of its escort ships. They've got 5 other US warships in the Mediterranean Sea. They also have a WASP amphibious ready group. So that's basically a team made up of 3 ships and about 4,000 sailors and US Marines. Also, fighter jets that are part of the US Marine Corps. There's an infantry battalion. They've got forces, namely from the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. What this is called is posturing, right? So the United States are basically moving these troops into the area to make themselves look tough, to flex. And honestly, when I see them moving the USS Abraham Lincoln into position, I can only help but remember that Yemen struck another US aircraft carrier, the Eisenhower. And, they tried so desperately to deny that and then ran away with the ship. So I doubt it's going to fare well for them if, push comes to shove. But in any case, there's certainly a lot of posturing and flexing going on from the Americans as a direct result of these assassinations. They think that they can, quell or temper or dissuade any sort of retaliation by the resistance. But I really doubt it's going to work. Again, YouTube demonetized my channel.
The assassination of Ismail Haniyeh and Fuad Shukr, the Israelis are in panic mode. They've been sending and dispatching Western diplomats on their behalf to carry messages to Iran and tell Iran to de-escalate and not turn this into a big deal, which is very funny because you see these Canadian officials and American officials and all of them joining in as a chorus and saying, oh, we urge calm and we urge restraint in the following days, and we don't want a regional war. Well, where are they when Israel is about to do things like escalate by murdering the top diplomat in Hamas? It's bizarre. They always seem to urge calm and restraint when it's time for them to face the music, but they never want to keep their dog on a leash, do they? So even Jordan's foreign minister went and visited Iran for like the first time in 10 years and said, I'm not carrying a message for Israel, which means I'm carrying a message for Israel. And was basically saying that, they don't want escalation, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you have to understand what Jordan is. Jordan is basically, it's a made up country that was created by Britain. Sound familiar? Yes, it's like Israel. It's just a made up. And people in Jordan don't want to have ties with Israel. They hate it. But, the king does what he wants because he's backed by the West and Egypt as well. And now these Arab countries, these so-called Arab leaders like, the president of Egypt or the king of Jordan, these traitors, because most Arabs, make no mistake, consider them as traitors and Zionists. They're saying that they're going to defend Israel again. They will block Iranian or whatever other resistance drones from crossing their airspace, and they will shoot them down, and they will be loyal servants to Tel Aviv. We know. Didn't have to announce it. We know it. So you've got flights canceled to occupy Palestine. You've got a few carriers left, but most of them, have stopped, and the airports seem to have been shut down, which is not going to go down well because Israelis' primary response when there's a situation like this is to leave the country because they're not willing to die for the land they claim is theirs, bizarrely enough. Now, Nasrallah gave a speech a few days ago and talked about these assassinations and what's coming next. And the message was the same. Iran has been telling, the West and their diplomats, we're not going to temper our response and appease you for the sake of appeasing you. You crossed several red lines, not just one red line, by killing Hania in our country. Hania was a guest. Now, you might not know any, you might not have any notion of hospitality, but in the East, all right, in countries like Iran, hospitality is a big deal, right? So killing someone's guest, is an outrage. It's simply an outrage. And you crossed the line. You didn't just kill a Hamas leader. You attacked Iran itself. And it's. I'm going to talk about the implications on the battlefield, but just speaking superficially and just on the surface, it is an outrage. You can't do that. So never mind the political and military ramification. So Hezbollah, let me play you what Nasrallah just said the other day.
نحن من أجل أن يعرف العدو والصديق نحن في كل جبهات الإسناد الآن دخلنا في مرحلة جديدة مختلفة عن المرحلة السابقة. وأيضا يتوقف تصاعدها على سلوك العدو وعلى ردات فعل العدو. اليوم هو الذي يجب عليه أن ينتظر غضب الشرفاء في هذه الأمة، ثأر الشرفاء في هذه الأمة، انتقام الشرفاء في هذه الأمة لكل هذه الدماء المظلومة.
So this is the first clip I wanted to play, and here's the second one.
على العدو ومن خلف العدو أن ينتظر ردنا الآتي حتما إن شاء الله. على العدو ومن خلف العدو أن ينتظر ردنا الآتي حتما إن شاء الله. لا نقاش في هذا ولا جدل. وبيننا وبينكم الأيام والليالي والميدان.
So what does he mean when he says, between us lie nothing, lie only days, nights, and the fields or the fields of battle? He basically means that, it's just a question of time before we meet you in battle and we respond. There's nothing between us. There's just time and space. But that's it. Nothing will stand between us, us and a response to you. Now, the thing is, if this were 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, a speech like this, people would complain, and perhaps rightfully, that this critique has to be made, that it doesn't mean anything. It's like, it's all talk, it's all bravado, it's all braggadocio, and there's no action. But we're not living in those times anymore. You see, when they killed one of the resistance leaders in January, after a few days, they hit one of the Israelis' top spy bases. They fired about 60 missiles at the Mount Medhorn base, right? So they hit that one, which shocked the Israelis. Now, we can talk about whether it was an adequate response or not, but they did act, they did answer. When the Israelis bombed the Iranian consulate, the Iranian embassy in Damascus, did the Iranians not respond, albeit 2 weeks later, with a massive firework display, to put it mildly? Yes, they did. Now, what Hezbollah is saying now, what Nasrallah said in his speech, he said, this is not going to be a performative response. We're not going to respond just for the sake of responding. We're going to study, it's going to be a studied response. It's going to be something that actually counts, something that really hurts the enemy. That's what he's implying. So I have no doubt that it's going to be in the next couple of days. It certainly seems that way. And the Americans and the Israelis and everybody else seems to be anticipating it that way. I don't think it's going to be like last time, where they told the Israelis basically for 2 weeks, oh yeah, we're going to hit you. And they gave them all this time to prepare. I mean, the longer they go on, obviously, the better prepared the Israelis are going to be. But I think that we might see something special this time. We might see missiles and drones coming from a different direction. We might see civilian, if there is anything civilian in Israel. Again, the whole
missionary salute to my brother Out of Bunches for the $10 donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Definitely appreciate the love, family. Say salute, family.
Men and women all join the army, so how can they be civilians? A tiny percentage are actually civilians, but anyway. We might see civilian structures being hit. Why? Because the Beirut attack against Fuad Shukr was a war crime. I mean, they injured 70 people, they killed 7 people, and they bombed a residential area, a densely populated residential area. So we might see civilian structures, but not civilians being hit. So let me be very clear. Hezbollah are not going to go and commit a war crime. They might hit something that is not a residential building, obviously, but something that has more symbolic value, but isn't actually something that it's meant to rattle the Israelis. So is that performative? You could argue it's performative in a sense, because it's meant to rattle the Israelis. But that's the point of deterrence. Deterrence is making the enemy afraid to do something. Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas need to establish deterrence again, because Israel escalated on a horizontal plane. They didn't escalate vertically, they escalated horizontally. So basically, they need to make sure, they need to dissuade the Israelis from bombing Tehran again, bombing Beirut again. Otherwise, they will lose the upper hand, because the war thus far has been conducted primarily, it began on their turf, on the Israelis' turf, so to speak, in occupied Palestine. And it's been going on ever since, with Hezbollah at least. They've been pushing the Israeli settlements back and the Israeli line back, so also on their turf, and gaining ground. And, this is the first time that we've had such a long conflict where the Israelis are in a quagmire, and also that it's happening on their soil, so to speak, right, on the ground that they occupy. So they can't lose that upper hand. If they lose that upper hand, they're going to have, everything will go to waste. So I think that's what he means when he says a studied response. It's not about, putting on a display, a firework display. It's about really establishing or reestablishing deterrence. Because this is not just about the leaders that were killed on the battlefield. This doesn't make a difference. Again, I'm not trying to diminish Haniyeh, but he is not a military man. He is not a military commander. I know the Israelis might have told you that, or their minions at the BBC might have convinced you or implied that he is, to justify murdering him. But Haniyeh was a diplomat. He was actually traveling on a diplomatic passport. So, we have once again another violation of the Vienna Convention, just like we had the Israelis bombing the embassy, airstriking the Iranian embassy in April. They've gone and committed another violation. They've murdered someone carrying a diplomatic passport, being received as an official guest during an official state ceremony. I mean, imagine a Canadian official or an American official, a guest in another country, a diplomat is murdered, a top diplomat like Blinken. It's like someone killing Blinken and saying, "Hey, don't respond. Come on, man. Just roll with the punches. Just pull your punch and just take it. Just accept it. Don't escalate. Come on, man. Don't escalate. We just killed Blinken. This is not a big deal. Don't escalate." That's literally what they're doing right now. They killed the top negotiator of Hamas, and they have the nerve afterwards to say, don't escalate, please. Again, it's your dog that is escalating. You're the one not holding the leash, okay? So, again, the Iranians, Syria, Hamas, Palestinians, the Lebanese, they have the right to respond. I mean, it's not just a moral thing or, like tit for tat. I'm speaking legally. They legally have the right to respond. They can activate Article 51 of the UN Charter. They can, which upholds the right to self-defense. They can go to, the International Criminal Court. They can go to the International Court of Justice. They can cite Vienna Convention violations, which I just talked about, Geneva Convention, the war crime, bombing a residential area in Beirut. There's a million things they can do here. They have every right to respond legally, diplomatically, militarily. The Israelis escalated. When you kill the negotiator on the other side, you can't say then afterwards, "Oh, let's talk diplomacy." You just killed the diplomat. You killed the negotiator on the other side. It's a declaration of war. You're literally saying, "I don't want to talk. I don't want diplomacy. I don't want peace." Do you understand? There is no other message being sent here. There is no other message. And it's a double escalation. They did it on Iranian soil. They know you have to understand in politics and military matters the weight that this carries, that it signifies. It's not just they killed him in Iran. No. This is an affront on Iran and on Hamas. Okay, you have to understand it that way. It's meant that way and it's perceived that way. Make no mistake. And most of the world understands this. The Israelis are now putting people in bunkers. They've opened bunkers to the public. And the Shin Bet, which is basically the Israelis' version of the FBI, internal security and so on, they're preparing a bunker for Netanyahu. He's going to go and hide again like last time. So an underground bunker in Jerusalem where senior leaders can remain for an extended period during a war has been prepared by the Shin Bet security service and is fully operational. That's great. Netanyahu can maybe give another speech to Congress remotely while he's outliving World War III. Who knows? So here is Miller from the vampire who serves as a spokesperson for the State Department. He really does look like a vampire, doesn't he?
Of an Iranian response. So in April, there was an attack on an Israeli attack on an Iranian diplomatic facility or consular facility. I think at the time there was never a conclusion from the US whether it did count as a consular facility or not. Now we've got an attack on Iranian territory. Do the Iranians have the right to self-defense in this case?
So I'm going to answer that question this way. The right is one question. What's productive is another. And ultimately, we don't think it's productive or conducive to anyone's interests, including Iran's, to conduct further actions, be they retaliatory or not. Any further action by Iran just raises the risk of
what is that? He's so used to talking just empty bullshit that he doesn't even understand what he just said. He said that it's not productive to engage in any action, retaliatory or otherwise. What does that mean? They should cease to exist? So you're saying anything they do is wrong? Oh God, he's really funny.
To conduct further actions, be they retaliatory or not. Any further action by Iran just raises the risk.
He doesn't say military action. He says any action. Okay.
Risk of increased tensions. It raises the risk of further response from Israel or from other parties, and ultimately gets us into this position that we have worried about.
Yeah, any military action by Israel is not productive and leads to the risk of retaliation by Iran. You see, this goes both ways. And Iran is not the one that assassinated your top diplomat in Israel, are they? So this talk is all fine and well and sounds lovely on paper. It sounds very rational. If you're an alien and you just landed on Earth and you're listening to this vampire speak, he sounds like a rational human being. He sounds like a nice person. But the problem is that it's missing context, isn't it? As usual, he doesn't tell you that Israel is being counterproductive, is being escalatory, is being, behaving like a psychopath, and that they're giving it weapons, and not just weapons. You have to understand this is more than throwing a bunch of bombs, into the arms of an Israeli soldier and saying load it up and drop it. Israel could not do what it is doing without diplomatic, media, and political cover from the West. Do you understand? Soft power plays a very, very, very important part in prosecuting this genocide in Gaza, okay? And getting away with things like this. I mean, outrageous. And, it was already outrageous when they bombed the embassy. Never mind what they did to Haniyeh. You can dislike Haniyeh. You can sit there and say Hamas is the most evil thing in the world. The fact remains he was on a diplomatic passport when he traveled. He was being received on an official visit. This is a Vienna Convention violation. This is a cornerstone of international law. You can't go around bombing embassies, airstriking embassies like the Americans and Israelis, or assassinating diplomats. Remember, Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes and General Soleimani were also traveling on diplomatic passports. They were being received as guests of the Iraqi government when they were murdered by the Americans at the behest of the Israelis. So the Vienna Convention, it doesn't just guarantee diplomatic immunity, it guarantees the inviolability of diplomatic missions, premises, the buildings themselves with the residences, and the staff, the personnel who work at the embassy, the diplomats, the consul, etc. You can't go and murder them. I shouldn't have to explain this to people. It's one of the most successful conventions and treaties in history. Almost every single country on earth has signed the Vienna Convention. It's really a cornerstone of international law. So when you behave like this, you're opening the door. You're opening the door for the jungle. You're bringing on, and encouraging other people to murder your diplomats, which again is illegal and is wrong. But you're basically saying we will kill your diplomats. Tough luck. We're going to veto you at the UN Security Council if you complain. You can go to the International Court of Justice, but that'll take years. I mean, this is madness. And you saw what happened at the Mexican embassy in Ecuador. How they went and raided it. I mean, unbelievable. We've never seen something like that in history. Police in person just storming into an embassy. That was 1 week after what Israel did. So you see the negative effect. It is very real and present, and not just an imaginary danger.
Again, YouTube demonetized my channel because I'm not allowed to say naughty things.
He was killed. There's been a lot of speculation in the last days about the method of assassination used. So we heard some reports in the Israeli press that he was using a hacked or infected phone, and they tracked him that way, and that's how they got to him. This is possible. I don't know. But I find it very difficult to believe that, knowing about Pegasus, and we've known for a couple of years now about this Pegasus spyware, which compromises iPhones specifically, although there are Android versions as well. I find it very difficult that Haniyeh's security detail would allow him to use an iPhone. And, I don't know, it just seems a bit sloppy. I could be wrong. We don't know. But I think that the more likely thing is that they simply tracked him with human assets on the ground, okay? Again, when you have VIPs like Haniyeh, or diplomats, their security details are bulging, okay? You can tell that this is a VIP, there's a security detail, there's a convoy, and they're being moved to a place. It's not difficult to follow them. It's really not, okay? If you want to do it and you're a professional intelligence agency, it's easy. You don't need to hack their phone. They're very, it's a very clear convoy to follow. Now, the thing is, if you look at also the way that he was killed, they're saying that they planted a bomb inside of the guest house he was staying at, a couple of months ago even, that they snuck this in. Why do the Israelis say these things? They say these things because they want to project an aura, an illusion of technological supremacy and intelligence supremacy. And they do this every single time. And they do this in a manner that is really, typical of counterintelligence and propaganda. What you do is you'll have your agents go and, talk to their friends who work in the press, and you plant the story. And we saw this with Fakhrizadeh, who's the Iranian nuclear scientist who's killed in late 2020, I believe. They claimed that they had smuggled in some AI controlled gun and they did it piece by piece. They come out with like a movie script. It's a movie script. And they get it published in the New York Times. And it sounds real, and it could be real. But what is the likelihood of that? Look at the Israelis and how their so-called supreme intelligence failed on October 7th. The Israelis don't know what hit them on October 7th. And every single day since October 7th, they have been getting pounded on the battlefield. I'm not talking about bombing civilians. Anyone can bomb civilians. I'm talking about fighting other men, other soldiers, guerrilla fighters on the battlefield. Where is their intelligence? Where is their amazing supremacy? Show it to me. What goals have they achieved? What strategic victories do they have to speak of? None. Fuck all. So I find this very difficult to believe that they hacked his phone and that they planted a bomb in the exact guest house months prior. Get out of here. Who the hell plants bombs? What a pain in the ass. Why would you plant a bomb in 2024 when you have drones who can come in a few minutes, or planes that can come, get there in minutes, fire a missile and get out? Why the hell would you go through the trouble of smuggling in a bomb and then getting someone to find out where the goddamn guest house is and predict it and plant it in the walls? Jesus Christ, what a pain in the ass. Who would do that? What a sloppy operation. What a waste of resources. So I find this very hard to believe. It's impractical. But if you believe it, it sounds like, oh wow, they're so sophisticated. They were able to get agents in the country and find out which apartment he's staying at and put it. It sounds, it's like a movie, but it doesn't make sense. Not only that, but we have confirmation from the people that were in the guest house or on other floors, and I'll play you a clip in a second. The Iranian government themselves, people who saw the site saying that what killed Haniyeh came from the outside. It was fired from the outside. Now, the Iranian government are saying it's a 7-kilogram projectile. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if someone fired it from, it was an RPG or whether it was an airstrike or a drone strike. It doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, they found his location and they killed him. I don't understand this story where they planted a bomb inside. This is logistically impractical. It's annoying and time consuming and dangerous and risky and stupid and could go wrong. Whereas with a missile, you're much more likely to actually hit the target and it's easier. Now I'll play you Alistair Crook. Listen to what he has to say.
I happen to know a person who was in that house when he was assassinated. When I used to go to Tehran, I would meet him. He's a friend from Hamas, and he was on the 4th floor, I think, and Haniyeh was on the 2nd or the other way around. So they were very close together. And he said, they came back. Haniyeh came back from the inauguration about 11:30 at night, and then they sat around talking about what had happened in Beirut and discussing that. And then Haniyeh went up to his room about 1:30, and about 3:30, there was this huge thing that shook the building. He said he thought he was in an earthquake, but it was clearly, he went dashed down and found that his leader was dead, as he put it, and his bodyguard was dead, and that the whole of the wall, outside wall, was missing, and the roof was all falling down. And he said it's absolutely clear it came from the outside. There was a penetration through the wall of some projectile of some sort. So the sense, for Iran, of humiliation, of honor. This was their guest staying in a formal guest house, like, the guest house the White House has, if you like, the one.
The Blair House, right.
The Blair House. Putting a missile into the Blair House and assassinating.
Oh, the New York Times.
In any case, I think his point is rather well taken when he talks about the projectile coming from the outside. This makes the most sense. And if you look at the modus operandi of the Israelis, they usually consistently prefer to use drones and planes to assassinate people. I just talked about the 2 Al Jazeera journalists earlier. They hit them with a drone, right? They hit them from the air. I don't know if it was a drone or plane, but they certainly hit them from the air with a missile. The precision was astounding. And I don't mean that in a good sense whatsoever. On the contrary, I mean it in a devilish, cunning, conniving manner. So we've seen them do this with Soleimani. It was a drone that killed Soleimani. I think he was, as I said before, I think he was tracked on the ground by human resources, by human assets, and then they used a jet or a drone to kill him. And the problem is that when you have a target like that on your back, you can't really do anything. You can't stop, short of, I mean, of course you have radar and you can detect planes coming into your airspace and so on. But you saw how Yemen, for example, and Hezbollah have their undetectable drones. Who's to say the Israelis also and the Americans don't have undetectable drones? Of course they do. I'm certain that they do. And when you have such a high-profile target, you're more inclined to use it for a case such as this. So, it's not a question of simply, we'll find it on the radar and then shoot it down. It's not that simple. In any case, I don't know how they killed him, or whether it really matters in the end. I think the only sense in which it matters is that Iran has to improve its security. In the end, martyrdom is considered an honor. Dying for your country, for your land, to liberate your land. Palestinians consider that an honor. The resistance consider that an honor. The Israelis go and run away to Ben Gurion. So they don't understand the idea that you would lay down your life for your land, because they have multiple passports. Their parents were born somewhere else, or they themselves were born somewhere else. They're colonizers, not immigrants, colonizers, literally colonizers. They're settlers. So they don't have an attachment to the land the same way that Arabs, Muslims, and people from the Levant do. But nevertheless, it's not any less of a tragedy or any less of a loss. It's meant to be a terrorist act. It's like I said, Haniyeh was a statesman. He was a politician. He was not a military mind or a commander. Doesn't mean he was lacking in those areas, but nevertheless, it doesn't impact anything on the battlefield. We're still seeing the attacks on Israeli military positions. The resistance are going to respond and actually respond, not just saying they will, one day. There's actually going to be something. So, now what's important is for them to reestablish deterrence. That's what's important. Because for once, the Israelis are having to battle on multiple fronts and on their own turf. I mean, on occupied soil. It's not their turf, but I think my point is well taken. In the end, this is really, they have to improve their security. There's no question about it. I mean, losses like this they're simply unacceptable. They're unacceptable. There's no way around it. The criticism has to be made. And I think there will be improvements, and I'll tell you why. Because every time that leaders have been assassinated in the resistance didn't lose its head. I know there are some people losing their heads, like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, and thinking like, this is, it's such a humiliation and it's over. No. The resistance has lost many leaders that in their respective time periods were perhaps more important than Haniyeh, you could argue, right? You could argue that, Arafat, when he was poisoned, was maybe more important than Haniyeh. You could argue maybe that Sheikh Ahmed Yassin was more important than Haniyeh. The point is, or Soleimani, for example, that guy's a military mind, military commander, right? So strategically, you would think much more important for results on the battlefield. And yet, the resistance always made the necessary improvements and adjustments and came out on top. It's been an upward trajectory. And it's been consistently on that path for decades. It's not going to change. So people need to stop losing their heads, even though, it's still a terrorist attack. It's meant to shock. It's meant to subdue. It's meant to subvert. It's meant to, terrorize people, literally, in the sense of the word, and force them into submission and make them comply. It's not a battlefield victory. It's not a military victory. It's not a military target. It's just straight up terrorism, really. So people need to stop losing their heads. And you have even some scummy people trying to make this about, oh my God, don't trust Iran. Iran are Shia Muslims, and trying to make this about Shia versus Sunni. Please shut up, really. I mean, this is the scummiest thing you can do. Did Hamas say anything about this? Did they speak in that way? Did they accuse Iran of anything? No. So shut up, please. Don't make this about religion and start talking about Shia and this and that. These people, don't trust people like that, because they're basically doing Israel's work for them. Israel wants nothing more than division. That's the whole point. It's like cause a massive disaster in the enemy's camp or your adversary's camp. cause people to go wild and start fighting amongst themselves. This is a victory. It's like a double victory. You kill the figure, and then you cause chaos within the opponent's camp. So people trying to make this like cause divisions, either political or religious, within the resistance are basically doing Israel's work for them. They may not know it, but that's what they're doing. And I mean, they should be ignored. They're a bunch of idiots, because where do you think Hamas get their rockets from? Where do you think Hamas get their support from, militarily, politically, internationally? Without Iran, there would be no Palestinian resistance left. Without Syria and Iran getting the weapons to the resistance in Lebanon, in Palestine, there would be nothing. Who would be helping? Egypt? You think the crooked president of Egypt, or the king of Morocco, or the king of Jordan, or Saudi Arabia are going to save the Palestinians? Look what they've done. So don't make this about religion, and don't make this about anything else. You know, you have a camp of allies that have been helping each other for decades. This is not the moment to lose your head and act like it's the end of the world. It's not. And I think, if I may say so, I think that if Hania were here, he might echo the exact same words. And as a matter of fact, when other people were killed in the resistance, did you ever hear anyone saying these kinds of comments about making it about religion, or saying, oh, Iran this and Iran that? No, you didn't hear that, because divisiveness leads to a house divided on itself will collapse, right? This is how the saying goes. And that's equally true in politics. Divide and conquer is a typical classical imperialist strategy. Don't do the enemy's work for them. Don't do the opponents, the adversaries' work for them. That's just silly. That's a waste of time. But I think it's interesting, nevertheless. I have to, it's my job to report on what's happening, what may have happened. We don't have
kind of just the stage for us regarding the global geopolitical landscape as of today. How do you see it?
Well, as of today, we're beginning to see polarization beginning to occur, with the United States on the one hand wanting to back up its rules-based order as the lead in the West, as opposed now to the emerging multipolar world order that we're seeing coming out of Eurasia and the global South. And a lot of this has been foisted on us because of U.S. policies and its hegemony over time, particularly through expansion of NATO over the years, and now with NATO wanting to expand into the Pacific, and countries, and the fact that the United States, particularly the United States, has used the dollar and its Western financial system to sanction other countries, even our allies and companies within our allies, for its own foreign policy purposes. That represents extraterritoriality, if you will, and they've gotten a little tired of it, because sanctions have hurt people, and that's why you're now seeing them, some 40 countries now wanting to divest themselves of dollars and the Western financial system and ease more into a and away from the and create the BRICS countries, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus. And some 40 countries now want to do this. Just a few years ago, there were only 5. Now, what BRICS has done is attract countries which have tremendous resources, and the dollar, which is fiat currency, is not supported by gold or tangibles, as we would call it, and these other countries are gravitating more and more toward that. That's why you're seeing, and as a consequence of our hegemony, our use of economic warfare against other countries, meddling in other countries' internal affairs to the extent that we have, even so far as overthrowing other governments and participating in it, like we saw in Ukraine in 2014. And that's just one of the latest. The other countries are recoiling. They've had enough of it, and that's why you're now seeing this multipolar world order. And what's unfortunate is that even though we have wanted to keep a wedge between Russia and China, our policies have actually
Yeah.
driven those countries closer together
Closer.
as a consequence.
Indeed.
And that's what
Wow.
we're seeing today.
Indeed. And we're going to get back to NATO because, especially when you mentioned about NATO expansion into Asia, I'm going to get back to that later on as we move forward. So, I enjoy your cigar, Mike. I wish I had one. So,
Thank you.
all right, let me get into one of the key. I know your area of specialty is the Middle East and East Asia, that is, as it is known in some other literature. So, given the tensions that exist currently between Iran and Israel, and I just found out this morning that Iran has issued a warning to some Arab states not to intervene.
Or else.
And I know which state they're referring to. I mean, we can cite them: Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. Those are the main three, and even Iraq. But this message was given to Iran, to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt. Well, Egypt came forward and stated they are not going to intervene. Doesn't matter what happened, they are not going to intervene. My question to you, Mike, is how do you see, first of all, how will Iran conduct its attacks on Israel?
Well, if they attack, and they've stated that with certainty they're going to do something, it will depend upon how they go about it. The last time was, I believe, in April when the Iranian consulate in Damascus was hit by the Israelis. It took them about 2 weeks to finally respond with that 300 plus UAVs and drones and ballistic missiles. What I think was astonishing everybody, even in the West, is the fact that they had that capability to be able to reach from Tehran to Tel Aviv. I don't think people really had given them that kind of that credit until it actually happened. The UAVs and the drones were meant more for sounding out what that multi-layered Israeli defense system, missile system, was all about. What lit up? What would light up if there was incoming? And that's what they really wanted to ascertain. But the real damage that was done was when they shot their ballistic missiles and hypersonics at particular military sites, and they were successful. And that goes virtually unreported in the West. But they were successful. They sent their message, and at a fraction of the cost, I might add, as to what the West spent in defending Israel. But what it did show is that the Israeli defense system could be penetrated, and that there are vulnerabilities. And I would add, Hezbollah recently published some videos of UAVs flying around over Haifa, undetected, which also indicated that they had that capability of going around and photographing for now, very sensitive areas, but then going public to say to the Israelis, we have this capability. And I think that really upset a lot of Israelis that they had that capability, and that Iron Dome did not pick up those drones. So this shows perhaps a capability that we did not assess Hezbollah to have, and that and even though Israel is now bogged down with Gaza and now West Bank as well, if they wanted to take on with Hamas, if they wanted to take on Hezbollah, that's going to be a whole nother game altogether. And what I suspect is that if and when Iran decides to launch a counterattack, that it will probably be with ballistic missiles, unannounced, employing a coordinated effort among their proxies: Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Hezbollah, and maybe even from Hamas. Hamas demonstrated the other day it still can fire rockets out of the Gaza, even though Israel has been carpet bombing the place for months. So there's And this could, if Israel decides to expand, the United States doesn't want them to, but said they'll back them up. So they're sending a fleet in to do just that now, to back up as a deterrent. But that's not Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, has already said it didn't matter about U.S. warships in the Med. They had the capability to knock them out.
Yeah.
That's another indicator of something that I don't think we assessed that they had, that capability. So does Hezbollah have hypersonics? Because it will take something like that to get a carrier. So we have to weigh all of these elements, and I don't think we would put ground troops in. I know some Marines are going in, but that's mostly for evacuation purposes of Americans out of Lebanon if they choose to leave. And back in 2006, they had to back up warships to bring them out and take them over to Cyprus.
Very interesting. Speaking of Lebanon, please correct me, Mike, if I'm wrong. I've always believed, of course, given the history and as one who spent time in the region, so I kind of was familiar with the capabilities of the Hezbollah. Since the beginning of this conflict between Israel and Gaza, I've always argued that, mark my word, Israel will not, I repeat, Israel will not go into Lebanon. Will I be wrong in this assessment?
I think they're beginning to have a different approach. They learned a lot from 2006, but when you listen to some of Netanyahu's crazy ministers, namely Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, they want to reclaim what they claim is God's given lands, biblical lands to them, and that would include at least up to and beyond the Litani River in Lebanon. They've already demonstrated that they can hit Beirut, and they hit Dakhia the other day, which is a place that I'm very familiar with. I used to have an apartment there, and it was. But I don't know that if they will actually put boots on the ground, but they certainly will use missiles. They will use drones. They may bring in some troops. They've already notified UNIFIL, the UN peacekeepers, trying to separate the two sides, that they intend to come in. So, and Nasrallah has already placed the marker that if they step into Lebanon and hit Beirut once again, then they're going to go full bore and launch against major cities such as Tel Aviv. To go back to Iran, I think Iran, if they do retaliate, they probably hit military sites around Tel Aviv. They're not going to be. I don't think they'll be aiming at civilian sites.
They won't. Okay. Now, regarding the Arab world, and I want to get into this first before I'll get back to having asking you the question about what is the purpose of the U.S. getting involved. We'll get into that soon, but I want to get your insights about the Arab world. As the Iran warned those countries, mainly those three, in my opinion, and mainly two, because Egypt now already declared that it's not going to intervene. Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Why do you think, again, and given the relationship that is now exists between Iran and Saudi Arabia, why will Iran go ahead and issue a statement like that, especially when it says that, and I quote here because I just read it this morning from overseas, Iran has reportedly warned Arab countries, including Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates, and others, that if they attempt to intervene in Iran's response against Israel, they will be targeted as well. Why do you think Iran all of a sudden, it's almost like jeopardizing its relations with Saudi Arabia that just has been brokered by the Chinese? Why will they go this far by stating this, in your opinion?
Well, I think they're trying to place a marker that they don't want to have them interfering in what is a fight between Iran and Israel. and you're right. We have regular diplomatic relations reinstated once again between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I think Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain, all of these countries are leery. They're supportive of wanting to have peace there, but they don't want to have the tensions that existed. And what they would like to do is have the turmoil in Gaza subside and reestablish relations with Israel, and because they have other designs in the region. But you see, the problem is that all of these countries that you just mentioned have U.S. bases on them. So and if those bases are used to shoot down Iranian missiles, then Iran feels that they will be compelled to respond to those bases. There are some 35 U.S. facilities surrounding Iran. Someone once joked, we have 35 bases in the Middle East, and someone put Iran right in the middle of them. But when you look at the map, when you look, that would include bases in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain. They're all into the Sunni-backed countries. Now, the fact that Egypt, which is now having this major experience with the Israelis, and the Israelis are very hard over with the Egyptians with respect to Rafah. Now they're beginning to show a different turn. And you're also seeing Turkey now saying that they will go to war against Israel if this continues. So you're beginning to see a coalescing of the Sunnis with the Shia. And that, when you get the whole Islamic world against you, against Israel, then Israel really has a problem. Up until now, it's just been the Shia. But things are evolving. And the more hard line and the continuous bombing that Israel displays in hitting Gaza, and then wanting to push forward militarily into Lebanon. I think you see that then gets into areas of influence that the Saudis have always cherished, and also into Syria. Syria is 80% Sunni, so so it's a real balancing act on the one hand, but that's why there's a concern about a regional war. And if Israel attacks Iran with a lot of firepower and wanting to bomb their nuclear sites, that has the potential of bringing the Russians in, because and the Turks. So this is we're really on pins and needles here, and this is why you're seeing efforts to try and get Netanyahu to back off, have a ceasefire. But even though the United States is led by Netanyahu, Netanyahu in turn is led by his ministers, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, without whom in his cabinet his government would fall, and he would be out of office and subject to prosecution for outstanding legal issues.
So for him, dragging the war is a political benefit to stay out of.
Let me add. He outlined to the U.S. Congress what I would call his war plan.
Yeah.
And his war plan basically said he wants to hit Iran, and he wants U.S. help to do it. And then you had the Congress cheer. So that's I don't know that they were cheering the policy or just cheering the guy because he's showing strength at that point and saying sounding rhetorically great. But the substance of it is that he went back immediately, and the next thing you know, you have this mysterious attack on a soccer field in the Golan, the Israeli occupied Golan, and then the immediate call for wanting to go into Lebanon. So there's something. This all seemed to me to be prearranged and orchestrated in cahoots with the United States.
Very interesting when you said how events happen. Events don't happen in a vacuum. And my point
and I don't believe in coincidences.
I don't either, especially in these matters of geopolitics. I look at it just, for example, what's going on right now in the UK. I don't know if you guys know that what's going on in the UK just happened after the UK administration announced that it will not be selling weapons to Israel. I found it, that's to me surprising. Let me go back to your earlier point before we jump into Russia, because Russia's role in this, very interesting. But I want to get your point on the US. Why is the US announcing that we will support Israel when it has nothing to do with our interest? Why the heck are we going again for another conflict in the Middle East that we all know, like we haven't learned anything from Iraq, we haven't learned anything from Yemen, we haven't learned anything from Afghanistan? Why are we doing this?
Well, you have neoconservatives in both the Republican and Democrat parties that have pushed these agendas, these narratives. They want to back Israel. We've always looked at the Middle East through the prism of Israel, never looking at Iran for Iran's sake. It's always been, how would it that's what we did in 2003 with respect to Iraq when we invaded, and there were warnings. I was one of the few who said we shouldn't be going into Iraq because it will create a power vacuum that will in turn allow the Iranians to fill it. And there is no, and I also, because I was in the area that I was involved in, we didn't see the WMD that the administration was touting as a basis to go in, and we said so, and immediately we became isolated in our own work, and because we were not team players, and as a consequence, and no WMD was operational. WMD was found. Yeah, you found some stuff on the shelf and stuff like that, but nothing operational. So and we haven't learned from our multi-trillion-dollar expense in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we're still suffering from that. As a result, we have we're now accumulating a $35 trillion debt that we have no way of paying off.
Yeah.
And so these have accumulative effects. All of our actions have consequences, and we don't realize that. Well, all we do is react to events. We have no strategic thinking at the helm. Indeed. And this is what's really problematic. And I don't see it forthcoming, perhaps in either administration. Hopefully, if Trump gets elected, he will have learned not to rehire these neocons that wanted to push him into going to war against Iran and giving him a blank check for Israel.
But even Mike, even with Trump, there's a lot of voices. I'm one of those. I argue that the guy is not qualified to be president, first of all, has no understanding of what global affairs are all about. And third element, he's already giving in to Israel. So my assumption is that once he becomes a president, if he becomes president, so it's carte blanche for the Israel to do whatever. And that's when my fear.
I have a theory.
Yeah.
He's learned a lot from his first term. He gave Bibi Netanyahu all that he wanted. He pulled out of the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal, and look what happened. They were in compliance at the time in 2018.
Indeed.
And as a consequence, because we pulled out of this agreement, no other country ever wants to enter into any agreements with us again. That and for other reasons, the promises on NATO expansion, all of these agreements we made, we threw them out. All of our arms control agreements, we have pulled out of them. So no country wants to enter into anything with us, into agreements any longer because of our past actions, and we have done this to ourselves. And as a result, I think what Trump may do, now this is my theory, that because if he wins, he will not be able to run again. And he's a real estate guy, and he wants to protect Trump International. I think he's going to look more toward working with the Saudis if he's in the administration. And the and the Saudis want two-state solution. They want normalization. They want to reestablish the Abraham Accords, and because that was the way. But this time you have to figure out a way to deal with the Palestinians. Before, that didn't happen. And this is one of the stipulations that Crown Prince bin Salman has been stipulating, that you have to have the two-state solution. He wants to go back to the 67 borders. I doubt that will happen.
I doubt it either.
No, especially with Smotrich, and Ben Gvir. They're an interesting duo. They basically they're really representing another faction within Israel that is against the mainstream government. They are basically Sumerians and backing the settlers 100%. And the settlements have already been decreed and determined to be illegal under international law. Yet they're the ones who are pushing the settlements into the West Bank and ultimately into Gaza. They want to move all the Arabs, all of the Palestinians out of those regions completely and open them up only for Jews and the settlers. And this is perhaps creating, and now they want to draft the more ultra orthodox. I wouldn't have them in my military because you wouldn't be able to rely on them. So consequently, I think it's tearing the internal fabric of the country apart. So there is the potential for civil war even within Israel.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, regarding the Saudis, if Trump will go into that direction, I mean, I was aware of one delegation from Israel that traveled to Saudi Arabia, even though you and I know how the Saudis feel about the presence of Jews on their land.
Yeah.
And even though the conversation was sensitive at that time, nobody knew about except some of us who were inside at the time. And it was the argument as to, can a deal works out between Saudis and the Israelis as far as diplomatic relations, whatever. This is, I believe, why the Saudis or why the Iranians issued the warning, even to Saudis, despite they just broke out a sort of an agreement, reached an agreement between the two.
Well, I think it also has to do with the fact that if U.S. bases respond to the Iranians, from Saudi Arabian soil, they're going to be attacked. So they're probably giving them fair warning.
Well, it's
and
fair,
now some countries have said, like Kuwait.
Yeah,
I think Kuwait has basically said already, you cannot use your bases to attack Iran.
Yeah.
Now I haven't heard that yet from Saudi Arabia.
Well, Saudis
from
are
the
wishy-washy.
UAE.
Saudis and United Arab Emirates are wishy-washy. We all know how they are.
They're seeing which way the winds are blowing at any given moment.
Indeed, Mike. So, I want to get your take while we're still in that region before we move elsewhere. I want to have your take about the role behind the scenes of Russia. If those who understand international affairs or geopolitics, there is no way that the Russians will miss this opportunity, geopolitically speaking. So I am aware of a trip by the intelligence officers from the GRU to two locations. One of them is Yemen, one of them is Iran. So is this, in your opinion, and given that, by the way, Russia has already delivered, to my knowledge, some sort of advanced weapons, but this one's to Yemen, the H group, the Houthis, the anti-ship missiles. Is this, in your opinion, a development that suggests that Russia is telling Iranians, we have you back? Go for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it also stems from the fact that the West has been supplying weapons to Ukraine as proxies. So Putin's response has been, okay, if you're going to help my enemy, I'll help your enemy. And that's what I see happening. What I think has gone into Iran are EW, electronic warfare systems, and these are there's three of them that they put up, and they go up about 37 meters each, and there's about three of them, and they are meant to scramble incoming missile electronics, the electronics of incoming missiles, and it's a microwave. It's a form of EMP, but it's meant to neutralize the guidance systems of these missiles should the Israelis fire them at the Iranian bases. So and plus I think they're probably going to give the Russians will give the Iranians advanced S-400 air defense systems, at least the S-400, possibly the S-500. And that's only so far the S-500's only been relegated to the Russian military. So. But you get to another point, having Russia having Iran's back. Yeah, their relationship has grown more into an alliance. And you had Shoigu, the former defense minister, and who's now the national security guy for Russia, going into and meeting with Iranian officials, not only for military but economic talks. And you got to keep in mind too that Iran now plays a very, very prominent role as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. That would include Russia, China. It's now a full-fledged member, not only of BRICS, but also, and that's recent, but also of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
The SCO.
And this, the SCO, they represent what I see evolving with the SCO, even though it's primarily an economic base. And you have the Belt and Road Initiative. It's to set up economic corridors. You have the Eurasian Economic Union as part of this group. All of these elements combined, the BRICS, the SCO, the EU, and the and the Belt and Road. When you put all of these together, it really constitutes this new multipolar world order, of which Iran now is a very prominent member, and along with Russia, along with China, and they are part of the corridor process to move the Belt and Road Initiative as it's developing. You have more than 140 countries now that belong to the Belt and Road.
Wow,
that's quite extraordinary, and that goes into Africa, into Latin America. And you even have some European countries that have expressed an interest in wanting to join that because they see the EU has limited days. The Economic Union, European Union has limited days. It's fracturing. It's become sort of a supranational government, which countries such as Hungary, Slovakia are recoiling against because it's dictating everything, all of their internal, external policies, and countries are tired of it. And you're probably going to see more and more, and you're seeing them now. You're seeing the European Union talking more of creating its own defense system apart from NATO. So they're beginning to see a fracture in NATO as well. And you're seeing the Germans and the French beginning to compete to do that. So I think Iran, and they're very reluctant to impose any more sanctions on Iran. And Iran, because of all the sanctions over the years, both Russia and Iran, and even China now, all the countries that are heavily sanctioned, have found ways around the sanctions, and that's why they've now created the BRICS mechanism through which now they're divesting themselves, they're de-dollarizing, and going with the exchange of their own currencies. And that could also represent ultimately trade-free zones. So there's among these countries, so that when they trade, they're not being subject to tariffs. And this will be apart from what the West, the EU and the United States is offering to them with all kinds of contingencies and stipulations and restrictions, and they're sick of it.
Very, very interesting. One last thing on this part, and we'll move on into talking about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Hypothetically, in the case of Iran and Israel conflict, when, I'm not going to say if, but when Iran launches its attack, And if Israel retaliated, are we going to see an expansion of the conflict that will include other major powers, including China? What do you think, Mike?
I think you'll see certainly Russia.
Okay.
You will certainly and Turkey. Turkey's the second largest military in the Middle East. That's significant. And even though it's a member of NATO, they are member. But Turkey is very interesting. It wants to create its own Turkic expansion through the Caucasus, the North Caucasus, and into Central Asia. We're seeing that emerge. Putin is very aware of that, and even though it might compete somewhat with spheres of influence by Russia, it's not necessarily conflicting, even though he sees it competing somewhat for influence. And that doesn't bother Putin at this point, because they do get along quite well between the two. And they are all members of the SCO, all members of BRIC. Well, Turkey is not, but they are certainly, they have good bilateral relations, and Turkey relies very heavily on Russia for oil and gas.
Yeah, but
so
can be. But Mike, can Turkey be trusted?
Well, Erdogan, and again, this is the cult of the personality. He's guiding all of this. This is the strength of his personality that is moving Turkey into this prominence. As long as he's around, I think he's the one who's guiding this. He has this aura around him. He's almost like a mini Stalin, if you will. It's the cult of that personality, as I say. He is Turkey, as they call it. Yeah. So it's and he has been very supportive of Hamas. Yeah. And he's actually had Hamas living in Turkey for a time. He's also trying now to make amends with Syria. Yeah. So he's paving the way, and also with Iraq. I think he wants to pull out of northern Iraq, which is they've had bases there illegally for years. Yeah. And so I think he's trying to lay his foundation, reestablish his orientation more toward a Turkey, spreading his Turkic influence, and countries that have previously, I mean, Central Asian countries historically have always been under the Turkic influence. You look at the western part of China, Xinjiang province, that is all Turkic. Those people were Turkic before the Huns moved in recently. Yeah. But they are the Turkic influence goes way back to the Ottoman, and so I see him really wanting to reestablish a neo-Ottoman empire.
Very, very interesting. Hey guys, just for those who just joining us here, I'm having a conversation here with Michael Malouf. He's a former Pentagon officials for over 23 years, almost 30 combined with the experience. Let's shift the conversation to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and after that we'll move into Asia, because I like to have your insight, Mike, on those key geographical locations, and also the policies that's going to be emanating from not only Washington but Brussels as well, but also from Moscow and Beijing regarding the host of issues there. But let's start with the Russia-Ukraine. We all know. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. Ukraine is a failed state. Ukraine is done for. So now, what is the end game for NATO with its sort of fomenting more tensions and providing the support and all that stuff into Ukraine? That is, what is the end game, in your opinion?
I think that the United States has basically looks upon their effort in Ukraine to have been a failed case. That's why you're beginning now to see them working on Armenia, working through the Transcaucasus areas, and to once again to find ways to isolate Moscow, Russia. You see, the whole idea of Ukraine was to isolate and in bringing NATO countries up to the Russian Federation boundaries was to isolate or contain Russia. And so consequently, the United States is making yet another effort to go through the Trans-Caucasus, to work with Azerbaijan and Armenia, and to try to move its influence into those regions. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because these people also see how we're now treating such countries as Georgia, the country of Georgia, in which we used to do military operations. Now we're sanctioning them again because they dared to pass their rules on foreign agents in the country. We have similar rules, but they did it, which identifies how much monies are coming in from abroad into NGOs, and we do the same thing. If it's a government, we don't do it on private entities, but entities that are associated with government, we do it. Now, that's what Michael Flynn was indicted on a few years ago. He was working through a Turkish company that had ties to the Turkish government. So we do the same thing. Again, being in charge of the rules-based order in which we can make the rules, we can also break them whenever we want. So that's what's happening.
Which is not right.
It's not right. It's that inconsistency that is hurting us internationally.
Yeah, right. So now, what's going to be happening to NATO? Because we're all seeing the fragmentation that exists within that organization. It's a relic of the past, in my opinion.
This is my theory of what's going to happen.
Finished.
I think if Trump comes in, the NATO countries, such as the Scandinavian countries, they're going to begin looking less at a cohesive NATO, because 32 countries can no longer agree in unison on one thing. It's impossible. So they may fragment into mini alliances, such as the Scandinavian countries or some of the European countries, and we see it already in the MENA, the Middle East, North African countries, in which Morocco and these countries have actually set up their own defensive alliances. And that's what NATO has gotten away from. It's gotten away from being a defensive alliance into an offensive alliance. And this is why when you have nuclear weapons on your soil and all that, you're no longer a defensive country. And when you're moving in missile systems aimed at Moscow, those are offensive. Even the anti-missile systems that we wanted to install in Romania and what have you, they could be turned around and used to launch Tomahawks. That makes them offensive. Russia knows that. That's why they're now bringing their own. That's why they basically said, okay, you tore up the INF, the Intermediate Range Treaty. So we're no longer going to adhere to it. And they're going to be moving hypersonics into Kaliningrad and what have you, which puts them even closer to Europe. Europeans must realize the gravity of what they're agreeing to, particularly in Germany. Germany has agreed to take these missiles, and the people have not voted on it. And they're really upset about it. It's the leadership. And I make a distinction between the leadership and what the people want. They do not represent what the people want. And that makes them prime targets at all times as a consequence. Now, one of the reasons why the United States tore up the INF, even though they've made a baseless claim that Russia had violated it, is that the other countries now have developed intermediate missiles, and they would like to include China, Pakistan, India. They all have that, even North Korea, which good luck on that. But all these countries have intermediate ballistic missiles now. And at the time we had the INF treaty, it was only with Russia, then Soviet Union. It was a bilateral arrangement. Now we're seeing, now these other countries have it, and it makes it virtually useless. And but as a practical matter, when we get Germany, and Scholz, the chancellor, is so weak, agrees to have missiles like that installed, that gives NATO that offensive capability that people should be alarmed about, because That's putting hypersonics aimed right at them. Not the United States so much, but they're the ones who are on the front lines.
Yeah. Well, that's why some countries don't understand that when we say, yeah, we support you, that doesn't mean we're going to fight on your behalf. They don't get it.
There you have it. Yeah. Well, it's a serious problem. And I think people are coming to that realization that the United States drove them to this predicament, had them wean themselves from their reliance on Russian energy. And now they're having to grope around the world looking for new forms of energy. And what the United States offers is so expensive that they realize that they're being economically built and extorted as a consequence. And it only benefits the United States. It's not benefiting them.
Yeah, well, like I always say, Mike, Europe is like a child that never grows up and is always in constant need of direction and discipline. That's how I've always viewed Europe. Because, I have family lived in Europe. I have family in France, Germany, Holland, England, and so forth. And especially the ones in France. I've always used to argue with the family. Anytime I go and have dinner and we chat, and you always hear the president. At that time, I remember it was Jacques Chirac when he was president. Then he came François Mitterrand after him. Then Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Then François Hollande. All of them talking about we need to build our own defense. It was nothing but a talk. It was nothing but a talk. And I told my family, they ain't going to move forward. You guys are so weak. You don't have a political will to stand on your feet to say to the Americans, no, we're not going to do that. Angela Merkel, when she was a chancellor, she was the only one, in my opinion, able to tell the Americans, no, we're not going to do that. That's why she maintained her good relationship with the Russians at that time.
Well, she ruled very well, and her absence now is being really felt because Schultz is so weak. And Macron cannot, even though he wants to be in charge, he's awful. He doesn't even have internal support. He's awful. So Europe is in trouble. EU is fracturing, and even though it wants to be a supranational bureaucratic overlay of nation states. That's beginning to grow thin as well. And I think you're going to see more countries increasingly rebel against it.
Very interesting. Let's shift to Far East. And especially I want to use a term, you mentioned it earlier, Mike. It has to do with NATO becoming an offensive alliance, not a defensive. And this cannot be more clear than NATO's plan in Asia. So why the heck is NATO going to establish an office in Tokyo? And why are we fomenting tensions in the Far East? Is that where the next conflict?
NATO is, under Stoltenberg especially, has been an entity trying to reestablish its identity after the end of the Cold War. You see, when the Cold War ended, NATO stayed, but the Warsaw Pact went away. And as a consequence, NATO expanded some 5 to 7 times, and up to the Russian border, and that's against. Get this: 3 presidents, a Secretary of State promised that wouldn't happen. Secondly, there are a half a dozen agreements that the West agreed to with Russia, called on the issue of what we call indivisibility, that you don't arm the West at the expense of the East. But that's precisely what happened. And we threw out all of those agreements by moving NATO the way we did to the border. Though that's an offensive effort. And so consequently, since NATO is not, unless and until NATO breaks up, I think the SCO is going to become the Eurasian version of a
it's like security alliance.
A defense alliance. Yeah, I think so.
Well, because if we go with your analysis here, Mike, I'm seeing the trend in Asia regarding 3 countries, actually 4: Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and Australia.
And Australians have already said we don't want NATO in there.
Yeah, but Australians, they just talk, Mike. I won't trust them. You and I know. We've both been in DC.
Yeah, I know.
You and I know that the decisions regarding Australia are made in Washington, not in Canberra.
Well, I'm not that quite familiar with the internal politics of Australia, but it looks like their prime minister is recoiling against some of the decision making by the AUKUS, and as they want to keep their relationship well with China because of trade. They want to, and secondly, it's I don't see China, I don't see Japan or South Korea or even the Philippines uniting to go up against China militarily. Maybe economically they may compete, but not militarily. That would be a disaster for them. Yeah. And now you have Russia moving into North Korea, which is a very significant move, and that I think will give North Korea a whole new life. And on the one hand, and I think that's diminished the South Korean impetus to work with the United States vigorously in having these military exercises and what have you, because it's aimed at them. And every time we do that with the South Koreans, the North Koreans react. And we got to stop doing that. And we got to. And North Korea is a reality. It's just the way it goes. Yeah. And the Russians now have made that very clear by entering into these economic and military agreements with them. Yeah. So and it has moved Russia along with China. And I think the Chinese are happy about that because they don't really get along all that well with the North Koreans. But I think having the Russians there to placate the North Koreans, I think that helps in relation to the whole SCO movement and association. It keeps some stability in the region, and it also checks the influence, the growing influence of a NATO and Western powers coming into the region. India is still working with. It's part of the SCO. It's part of BRICS, just as BRICS includes both India and China. So I see them trying to work things out politically with some of their disagreements, and we also see India's relationship with Russia becoming solidified, and that really upset the United States recently when Modi, the prime minister, gave Putin a big bear hug.
I remember seeing that one. Regarding one key point that I want to have your answer or your input about, when you mentioned Japan and South Korea will stand no chance against China militarily, which we all know. Now, can the same thing apply to the U.S.? Do we stand any chance against the Chinese militarily, given our performance in Afghanistan and Iraq?
I don't. We have. I think we have a. That's going to be a difficult one because it depends upon their outreach. We have the missiles, but if we move fleets, carrier strike groups in there, those ships could be easily sunk. It will probably be a duel of missiles. We have submarines, ballistic missile submarines. We still have the edge militarily in terms if we use nuclear. Conventional,
no. Well, the Chinese also.
I don't know how we would fight a conventional war against China. It would be impossible. There's no way. It would have to be nuclear or not at all. That's why we got to learn to get along with people.
I hope so. So in general term, Mike, will it be fair to say that NATO's thinking of the expansion east suggests that that's where the next conflict theater is going to be?
They want to include it. The United States has been pushing to move into the Pacific for years. That's why they've been trying to get out of the Middle East, but the Middle East keeps dragging the U.S. back in there. But their shift is more toward the Pacific. But I think there are going to be limitations, and the Chinese right now have more warships than the U.S. does. A lot more, maybe 2 to 3 times more right now. So and if they wanted to take out Taiwan, all they would have to do is freeze that island or blockade it. And nothing would get in or out. They don't have to attack it. And in the United, what would the United States do? What would the United
What we
States
can
do?
do?
Nothing.
Yeah.
What could they do?
Yeah. And I never believed, Mike, that China will embark on a military ventures regarding Taiwan. I mean, how can we say a country is going to invade its own? It's like us invading Hawaii. Just doesn't
Well, I
make
see a
sense.
blockade. I see the potential for a blockade. I don't see an invasion. I don't see mass missile attacks. No, I don't see that. But I do see that if I do see potential encounters, that if we use Japan and South Korea as bases
or Australia
to launch from, that then puts them in the bullseye, and they don't want that. They don't want that because they're stationary. They can't move around. We come halfway around the world to create havoc when we should be staying in our own area of influence. I think if Trump gets elected, I think he's going to work with Xi Jinping and with Putin to reestablish spheres of influence.
And yet, Mike,
a pogrom and a terrorist insurgency. Now, you are not being told the truth about what's actually happening by most of our politicians and our media outlets. That is because some of those who are currently denouncing this uprising have played key roles in whipping it up. The truth is, our political and media establishments have spent the last 2 decades in particular whipping all this up. They did this. This is on them. And we need to hold them to account. And I'm going to show you in this video exactly what they've done. Now, first of all, solidarity, endless solidarity with British Muslims and people of color of all faiths and none, many of whom feel fear leaving their homes right now. All too many who don't even feel safe in their own homes as far-right extremists rampage around, throwing petrol bombs, any missiles they can, designed to injure, maim, and to kill. Now, I've been abroad, hence the silence, but normal service now resumes. This video is based on a lengthy thread I've written on Twitter with the receipts, but it's helpful to be equally clear about what happened, how we got to this point on this platform, because unless we understand that, we won't be able to stop this horror from happening, continuing and happening again. Now, as our politicians presided over crumbling public services, the trashing of secure jobs, an ever-escalating housing crisis and falling living standards, it was oh so convenient for both political elites and media outlets to whip up anti-migrant hostility. So we didn't blame or hold responsible those who are actually in charge, those who are at the top of society for all the problems that afflict this nation. Now, the supposed spark for this insurgency was the horrific killing of 3 girls in Southport. The suspect is British born. He's not Muslim. He's not an asylum seeker who recently arrived by boat. These are all claims which widely circulated and were used as the justification. And do you know what? If he was any of those things, it wouldn't have been a justification in any case for what happened. That anti-migrant hostility that I'm discussing, however, which is now on the rampage, specifically merged with Islamophobia a long time ago. And that has been incessantly whipped up since 9/11 in particular. British Muslims have been treated as dangerous and disloyal foreigners in their own land, while migrants and refugees who are Muslim are treated as hostile invaders. Let's begin with the now opposition Conservative Party. Tory Islamophobia is rampant and it is institutional. Baroness Saida Varsi, the most prominent Muslim Tory politician, warned long ago and over again that it was a problem from top to bottom in the Conservative Party. She told me personally that Michael Gove had played a key role in driving it, and she told me that back in 2019. When Sadiq Khan ran for London mayor and became Europe's most senior Muslim politician, the Conservative Zach Goldsmith, who ran against him for London mayor, ran a poisonous Islamophobic campaign against him. Since then, Sadiq Khan has been an obsessive target for the Islamophobic right. When Boris Johnson, then Tory politician before he became prime minister, compared Muslim women wearing the veil to letterboxes and bank robbers, there was a 375% surge in hate crimes against British Muslims. Far-right extremists embraced Boris Johnson when he became prime minister. Far-right thugs on the streets chanted, "We love you, Boris." I was there when they did it. And Tommy Robinson and Britain First, whose chief targets are Muslims, personally endorsed him as prime minister. The Conservative MP Nusrat Ghani claimed after she was sacked as a Tory minister that she said it was because her Muslim faith was making colleagues feel uncomfortable. She said that's what she was told. Now, after a Tory inquiry cleared the chief whip, who she accused of making these comments of rule breaking, Ghani allies said they feared a cover-up. There was relentless evidence of Conservative councillors posting anti-Muslim bile online. Many of them were suspended and later quietly reinstated. Polling repeatedly shows that the Tory membership is viciously Islamophobic. More than half of Tory members think Islam is a threat to the so-called British way of life, while over half believe conspiracy theories about parts of European cities being under Sharia law and so-called no-go areas. Protests over Israel's genocide have brought Tory Islamophobia to the fore. Explaining why there were so few arrests over protests against this genocide, Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary, claimed it was because Islamists were in charge in Britain, rather than the actual, real, honest answer for why there are so few arrests, which is because protests were overwhelmingly peaceful and there was no reason to arrest people. Lee Anderson, the former deputy chair of the Conservative Party, did have the Tory whip belatedly removed after claiming Sadiq Khan was under the control of Islamists, but notably, Tory MPs came to his defence. Lee Anderson, of course, defected to Reform and is now Reform MP for Ashfield. Back in the 2016 referendum over the European Union, the official Leave campaign was dominated by Conservatives, and it was unapologetically and flagrantly Islamophobic. The campaign falsely claimed Turkey was about to join the European Union and that Brits were at risk from Turks. One Leave EU poster highlighted 5 supposed soon-to-be EU members. 8 years on, none of them have joined. It then highlighted Syria and Iraq on the map. Not so much a dog whistle as a foghorn. Nigel Farage was notoriously responsible for the most incendiary intervention, standing in front of a poster of Syrian refugees with the slogan, "Breaking Point." He later warned he'd don khaki, pick up a rifle, and head for the front lines if Brexit wasn't delivered. The Brexit campaign was fought overwhelmingly on immigration, with Islamophobia a strong theme. So little wonder bigots were emboldened. They felt they were emboldened after the result and celebrated the result with hate crimes, often with Muslims as targets. Nigel Farage, an ally, of course, of Donald Trump, an Islamophobic pin-up, declared just this year that growing numbers of British Muslims don't share what he described as British values. But Labour too, now the governing party, has its own outrageous record in Islamophobia. Its own involvement in the calamities of Iraq and Afghanistan, in which hideous war crimes are committed against Muslims, radicalized some Muslims. This radicalization was then explained as inherent to Islam. This is a really critical point. We have never come to terms with the consequences of Western violence in predominantly Muslim lands, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, like, of course, Palestine today. That violence, that huge violence, of course it has consequences. It has radicalized a certain number, a minority. Of course that exists. But that is then explained as being something to do with Islam, therefore turning all Muslims into supposed menaces, violent threats, potentially. And that's because that context is stripped away, because then we would have to hold to account those responsible for that violence. Now, the so-called war on terror meant increased police powers and anti-terror legislation, which disproportionately targeted and also stigmatized young Muslim men in particular. Labour's Prevent programme has been described as a thought police targeting Muslims in this country. When in 2006, the Labour cabinet minister Jack Straw declared he was uncomfortable with veil-wearing Muslim women, which he called a visible statement of separation and of difference, it triggered an avalanche of Islamophobia in the media, as well as reported linked hate crimes against Muslims. Labour's immigration minister, Phil Wallace, ran a vile Islamophobic campaign against the Lib Dems in the 2010 election. A notorious leaflet shamelessly attacked the Lib Dems as wanting to give rights to illegal immigrants, as it put it, so-called illegal immigrants, which is not how you should speak about human beings, who were clearly in that leaflet presented as Islamist extremists. The emails that were then revealed, exchanged between his campaign team, included calls to make the white vote angry by going hard on the, in quotes, militant Muslim angle. After his election win was overturned in the courts on the grounds he lied about his opponents, Labour MPs rallied to his defence. In the aftermath of the Brussels terrorist attack, the former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair declared many millions of Muslims had an outlook that is fundamentally incompatible with the modern world. Now, this is important. When Tony Blair called for the West to ally with Vladimir Putin against Islamist extremism, it was revealing both had overseen mass slaughters of Muslims from Iraq to Chechnya and had a shared incentive in portraying Muslims as a violent rabble. What then of Labour more recently? It's not commented on enough. Jeremy Corbyn was often demonised for his perceived proximity to Muslim communities, portrayed as they were as hotbeds of anti-Semitism and extremism. In the 2021 Batley by-election, Keir Starmer's Labour unashamedly embraced Islamophobia. A Labour official briefed that Muslim voters were turning on the party because Keir Starmer was challenging anti-Semitism. In other words, the claim was that Muslim voters were anti-Semitic. After Labour narrowly won in Batley and Spen in 2021, that by-election, a campaign source bragged they'd built a new coalition, losing the Conservative Muslim vote over gay rights and Palestine while winning 2019 Tory voters. Now, I went to Batley and Spen and I spoke to campaigners, canvassers on all sides, including, of course, the Labour Party. Gay rights never came up on the doorstep. Not one person reports that coming up. But what that briefly did is try to present the idea that British Muslim voters hated gay people so much that they wouldn't vote for Keir Starmer, which made no sense because in the heyday of New Labour, when actually to their credit they introduced gay rights, Muslim voters overwhelmingly voted for the Labour Party. So the Keir Starmer, who's done nothing on the issue of LGBTQ rights at all, Muslim vote support has collapsed. So clearly there was no link there whatsoever. Now, after broadcaster Trevor Phillips was suspended from Labour before Starmer's victory as leader of the Labour Party for referring to Muslims as a nation within a nation, Starmer's Labour went on to reinstate it, sending a very clear message about their stance on Islamophobia. In 2019, the former Blair advisor, Philip Collins, wrote that Labour's anti-Semitism was a much bigger problem than Tory Islamophobia, clearly presenting a hierarchy of racism. He went on to become Keir Starmer's personal speechwriter for his conference speech. Now, after Keir Starmer hired esteemed black barrister Martin Ford KC, after leaked abusive messages from Labour officials, Ford exposed a hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party, in which, as he put it, anti-black racism and Islamophobia is not taken as seriously as anti-Semitism by Labour. Now, Martin Ford KC went on to declare that Labour wasn't engaging with this hierarchy of racism. Clearly, his report was not taken seriously at all. Meanwhile, a poll by the Labour Muslim Network in 2022 found a quarter of Muslim members had experienced Islamophobia, and a third of Muslim members had witnessed it within the context of the Labour Party. Now, crucially, 39% of Muslim Labour members and supporters strongly disagreed that Labour represented the Muslim community. That's shocking. Strongly disagreed. Bear in mind, they're Muslim Labour supporters. 39% disagreed as well. So the majority just didn't think Labour represented them. Just 12% agreed and 5% strongly agreed that Labour represented the Muslim community. The polling specifically found that even by 2022, before Gaza, this current horror in Gaza, Labour Muslim supporters' trust in Starmer had already collapsed. They showed the polling that Labour Muslim voters and supporters didn't think Keir Starmer took Islamophobia seriously enough. Now, when largely Muslim Labour councillors quit Labour in disgust at Labour's support for Israel's genocide, one Labour source briefed that the party was, quote unquote, shaking off the fleas. And Labour's contempt for the value of largely Muslim Palestinian life, well, that couldn't have been any clearer. After Labour gutted a SNP motion holding Israel to account for collective punishment Both the Speaker and Labour spread the message that it was because of threats to Labour MPs' safety. This was widely understood as meaning Muslim protesters, triggering a wave of Islamophobia, supposedly dangerous, threatening Muslim protesters. In the 2024 election, Labour support amongst Muslim voters, normally a core Labour vote, went into collapse. In the 21 constituencies where 30% or more of the population are Muslim, the Labour vote dropped from an average of 65% in 2019 to just 36% in 2024. Labour was defeated by 4 independent candidates in communities with large Muslim populations. After Labour lost white voters in the Red Wall, it promised to listen and to learn, but this time it responded by claiming the party had been cheated. Well, that had consequences. You see, by claiming it had lost because of bullying and harassment, claims it has failed to substantiate, Labour fueled a toxic image of dangerous and threatening Muslims. Whether protesting or voting supposedly the wrong way, Muslim engagement in the democratic process has been demonized by the Labour Party. Now, it's striking too that when Labour suspended candidate Faiza Shaheen, it raised her speaking out about Labour's Islamophobia as part of the supposedly damning evidence, sending a very striking message. As well as our political elites, our media outlets have systematically fanned Islamophobic bile. A 2019 study found that 59% of media coverage of Muslims was negative. That rose to 78% with the Mail on Sunday. Now, in 2011, a Daily Star journalist resigned after revealing that the newspaper deliberately got its reporters to lie about Muslims, stoking up hatred. When the Sun newspaper did a front page splash deceiving its voters by claiming 1 in 5 Muslims had sympathy for jihadis like ISIS, it was forced to print a correction, but only months later and on page 2. When the Times did front page splashes about Christian child forced into Muslim foster care, it stoked Islamophobic bigotry. The copy emphasized white Christian child. It was forced to print a correction months later, but of course, the damage had already been done. These are just 2 examples of anti-Muslim deceit whipped up by a newspaper with devastating consequences. The truth is, the British press has been whipping up anti-Muslim bile for years, portraying Muslims as a dangerous and a hostile enemy within. Britain is a cauldron of resentment because, brutally speaking, social progress ground to a halt after the 2008 financial crash, and life has been defined by insecurity for millions. Whipping up Islamophobia in that context has redirected anger with devastating effect. The truth is, Islamophobia is rampant, mainstream, and respectable in this country. That's how we've ended up with 3 hideous murders in which the suspect, who isn't even Muslim, not that the current horror would be acceptable if he was, has led to an Islamophobic pogrom. Our mainstream politicians and media outlets have whipped up and made Islamophobia respectable for a very long time, helping to radicalize a significant level of the population who increasingly believe that they have a license to act on their hatred. Yes, Elon Musk and Twitter are clearly playing their role. Musk's platform has been overrun by far-right fanatics, and he's personally helping to whip up this insurgency, from spreading lies about 2-tier policing to declaring civil war in Britain is inevitable. But those focusing on Musk and social media at the exclusion of other factors are doing so because they know it would expose their own responsibility. Right now, of course, Muslims are not the only target. All people of color have been placed at heightened risk. Many now feel scared to leave their homes. Many don't even feel safe in their homes. The rest of us have a responsibility to show meaningful solidarity. Those believing far-right extremism can be defeated by the justice system are at best delusional. This is a political problem. A racist British establishment which delights in finding scapegoats for problems it causes is to blame. They did this. This is on them. Now, many of the so-called centrists applauded Starmer's victory on the grounds that politics would become boring again and a lost normality would return. A month ago, Anna Soubry, a former Tory minister turned cheerleader for Keir Starmer, tweeted, "Is it just me, but suddenly everything feels ... normal. No more psychodramas and scandals. Like the grown-ups are back in government and people can get on with their lives watching politics out the corner of their eyes. Safe." Now, those who tweeted or said those sorts of things, they just do not understand the turmoil in British society. For them, it was simply a case of these vulgar, embarrassing politicians who ran the country and just sensible people could take over and all would be well. They don't understand that this country has been in turmoil for a long time, including because of the policies supported by those that they believe to be the sensible moderates. Now, we need 2 things. We need an all-out war on racist scapegoating, which means taking on our media and our political establishments. We also need an all-out war on economic and social insecurity, which far-right extremists exploit by redirecting anger at all the wrong targets. But finally, a message for the far-right extremists terrorizing Muslims and people of color in this country. You're going to be defeated. You're going to lose. Your hatred of a society that is diverse and inclusive will never match our determination to fight for one that truly is. You feel that you have lost your country, and you are right. You have. You want to restore the past. Well, as the phrase goes, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. The England of the past put children up chimneys, made workers toil 96 hours a week, deprived women of the right to vote and much else, dictated who we were allowed to love, made people pay for their healthcare, crowded people into dirty slums, and yes, openly celebrated its whiteness. People fought at great cost to fight those injustices. And yes, today our elites impose all sorts of injustices on this country. This is, after all, a wealthy society where wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, while millions of all faiths and none, of all ethnicities, are condemned to insecurity and hardship as a choice because of a broken economic system rigged in favor of a tiny elite. But across this country, people of all backgrounds live together, work together, sleep together, build families together. And yes, there are divides, profound divides. And yes, there is institutional racism, which imposes injustice and suffering on the lives of all too many minorities. But there are many millions of us determined to change that. And as you inflict terror on our streets, you will only strengthen our resolve to free this country of the racism that you relish and you thrive on. We will defeat your hate, and we will hold to account those who enabled you all this time without being challenged. That's going to change. Please like and
chief instigators of these riots is someone called Tommy Robinson. And you can see him here wearing a t-shirt of the Israeli Defense Forces. He is openly taking photographs, posing with the genocidal army. He's gone to occupy Palestine illegally and taken photos on top of Israeli tanks. And we know for a fact that his benefactors, his patrons, are Israelis, right? His legal fees have been paid by Israelis, by Zionists. And he goes on Israeli television and he admits that all of these riots, these pogroms, are related to October 7, basically admitting that, well, you know, he doesn't like that people are protesting against genocide. So advancing an Israeli agenda, which is what? Which is Islamophobia, which is anti-Arab racism. Tommy Robinson. That's not his real name. This guy has about 5 different names. We think his real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. This guy calls himself, you know, a massive English patriot. But ironically, his stepfather is Scottish and his mother is Irish. So, you know, when you have someone like that calling other people less English and changing his name to something more English, from Yaxley Lennon to Robinson, he fled the United Kingdom just a few days ago. How can someone call themselves an English patriot and they have such disregard and contempt for the law? Again, you want to talk about illegal immigrants? This guy literally entered the United States with a fake passport. I mean, the hypocrisy is rank. No one is more illegal than American troops on foreign soil. No one is more illegal than British spy planes buzzing over Gaza or French troops occupying Africa, okay? Those people you're calling immigrants are refugees. They're running away from our mess. We bombed their homes. We killed their friends. We killed their families. We left them jobless. We destroyed their economies. We destroyed them with sanctions. We looted and robbed their resources for centuries, thieving to the point they can't recover and stand up on their own 2 feet. We kept drilling this into their heads, how the white man is so much better. And now that they want to come over and take a look and see where their money went, you put up a wall. If only there was a wall to stop your thieving ass 300 years ago. If only. You know, the same people whining about migrants, they want Arabs to tolerate Israeli invaders. These are people with weapons, with tanks, with nuclear bombs. And they encourage British Jews or European Jews to leave the country because they're so anti-Semitic. They want them to just leave the country and go to Palestine and emigrate on top of somebody else's land and give them bombs too. Christ, I mean, double standard is really, is really an understatement. You want to stop people from exercising their right under international law to seek asylum? Fine, but don't turn around then and lecture the world about human rights the next morning, all right? And don't talk to me about securing our borders. Our borders are perfectly fine. We have nuclear weapons. We have one of the best navies in the world. It's Arab borders that need securing from us, okay? It's African borders that need securing from the West. The top 3 countries that produce refugees are Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. All of these countries have one thing in common. They've been bombed and destroyed by NATO. All right. The West invaded and destroyed these countries. How bizarre that Tommy Robinson / Stephen Yaxley Lennon / Paul Harris / Israeli Zionist name won't mention any of this. The far right in France, in Britain, in America won't mention sanctions, bombs that create the refugees that they keep whining about so much. If you're so worried about foreigners coming to the country, then stop bombing people, stop stealing their resources, and mind your business. All right. Otherwise, you can fuck off and shut your damn mouth. And thank your lucky stars, by the way, that these refugees you demonize so much are innocent, decent human beings who aren't vengeful little gobshites like yourself.
Demonetize my channel.
Of hooligans, of rioters out on the streets. And the only word I can use to describe these are, pogroms. That's the only word I can think of. These are pogroms, okay? You have people coming out and trying to burn down mosques or throwing bricks and bottles at mosques, lynching or trying to lynch at least a black person who's walking down the street, and you have a mob of like 20 white people attacking them, or attacking an Asian person or a Muslim person or an Arab person. I've seen this over and over and over and over again. And it's unbelievable.
Get him out of here!
Yeah, so that stand, by the way, they essentially attacked a stall offering Qurans. Okay, so I mean, it's an obvious hate crime.
Yeah! Go on, you
Just the scum of the earth. These people are the scum of the earth. And then they were also trying to traffic, basically, to act as traffic wardens based on the color of the person driving the car. So they're literally standing there and saying, if you're white, you can pass, and if you're not white, you can't pass. They've gone and attacked graves of Muslims. They've put paint on the graves. They've vandalized them, essentially. They've gone and tried to burn down a hotel where migrants, or rather, Christ, it's starting to rub off. Their nonsense starting to rub off. Where they're attacking asylum seekers, which they call migrants for some reason. They are too thick to understand the difference between a refugee and someone who is an immigrant. But okay, what can you expect from such people? They literally tried to burn it down. And look at this mob standing outside. I mean, this is unequivocally attempted murder. It's attempted murder. All of these people are looking at life sentences. I'm not joking.
Oh shit, man, they're in. They're in. Oh wow.
Where are you bastards?
They're in. Fucking hell. They are we're upstairs at last. Get him out! Get him! Oh shit, man, they're in. They're in. Oh wow.
It's absolutely incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Here, look at the aftermath. Look at the damage that they've caused. So what they've done basically is they have a list of hotels where people who are making refugee applications, who are seeking asylum, right, are housed temporarily, you know, because they've fled war. They don't have resources, do they? And they've gone and tried to burn them down. Okay. And you have to ask yourself, where is the police? You have to ask yourself, what is the police doing during all of this, right? I think that's an interesting question to ask, because where we have seen the police, they've basically been attacking them. Okay, they've you know, they call they say that immigrants don't respect the law, but it's actually the far right that don't respect the law. They vandalize, they loot, they rob, they attack, they mob, they bully, they destroy, they you know, even unleash violence on the authorities. It's really amazing hypocrisy.
Go on! Ah, bikes and everything, boys! Get on! Go on, win the screen smash! Yes! Like and share the live, drop a follow, boys! Go on, boys!
Well, they say this patriotic behavior.
I mean, it's chaos. I mean, I can sit here all night and show you these
This
videos.
right
It's
here,
chaos.
real
You get
easy.
the idea. And all of this started. Why did this begin? Well, it didn't begin just yesterday, but nevertheless, the catalyst, if you will, is there were 3 girls that were stabbed in Southport, and they started saying that a Muslim immigrant had done it. And it turns out it's a UK national, so it's someone who's born in the UK, in Wales actually, who is Christian and has Rwandan parents. But they said that they're a Muslim immigrant. And usually the police would not release the identity of the assailant, but they did in this case, just to show what morons these, you know, how moronic these rumors are and how moronic the people spreading them are. Okay, so they said a Muslim immigrant did it, but it was a Rwandan who was Christian and born in Wales.
It was a black.
I mean, quite different profiles, yes.
On black people.
So it's amazing watching the BBC also. Look at how they describe this stuff. It's really unbelievable. So they call it unrest, not pogroms, unrest. So, you know, attacking mosques, trying to burn refugees alive. You know, I mean, I showed you the video. You know how dangerous that is, right? I don't have to explain that you burning down a hotel is attempted murder. There are people inside a hotel, usually. Yes, I've never heard of an empty hotel. So they know there are asylum seekers in there. They have these locations, and so they say that a car burns after being overturned during an anti-immigration protest. Well, I mean, when you're burning a car, is anti-immigration protest really the right term? I don't know. Or unrest, at least. Unrest sounds really mild. Well, what does unrest mean? A bunch of cows mooing? There's unrest amongst the herd? What does that mean? I showed you the videos. It's just a small section. It doesn't look like unrest to me. It looks like a lot more than that. And then they say, for example, they witnessed demonstrators carrying a banner referring to the Southport knife attacks. Again, that's done by a Christian born in Wales. Before throwing cans and bottles at police officers and shops with the shutters down. So this is very clearly hooliganism and violence, but they call it demonstrators. How do you differentiate them between someone, for example, chaining themselves to a lamppost or holding a sign and someone who throws bottles and bricks at the police? Don't you think demonstrator loses its meaning when you do that? And then also underneath, you know, they say cars and homes and side streets around the town center have been targeted, windows smashed, wheelie bins have been set alight. I mean, it's what they're describing doesn't match the terms they're using. Okay, they're basically trying to whitewash the far right protests, if we can again call them protests. They're more like pogroms, to make them seem like, you know, it's just a bunch of people who are just peacefully protesting. Well, obviously they're not. You can see here how someone on the BBC was talking about it on TV.
And for around half an hour, it was quite peaceful. There was a small counter-protest, and for around half an hour, it was quite peaceful. There was a small counter-protest, the pro-British march on one side of the town hall here, and the counter-protest on the other side of the town hall. It was around o'clock.
The pro-British march. Okay, whatever that means. So let me explain to you who's behind this. All right, because you have to understand that this is not an isolated incident. This didn't just happen, by coincidence. One of the chief instigators of these riots is someone called, well, who now calls himself Tommy Robinson. Okay, that's not his real name. That's not his real name. So this guy has about 5 different names. I'm not joking. You go on Wikipedia, he's got like 5-6 different names. We think his real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Okay, so this guy calls himself, a massive English patriot, but ironically, his stepfather is Scottish and his mother is Irish. So, when you have someone like that calling other people less English and changing his name to something more English, from Yaxley Lennon to Robinson, it sounds a bit hypocritical, doesn't it? And you can see him here wearing a T-shirt with the Israeli Defense Forces, and he's gone to occupy Palestine illegally and taken photos on top of Israeli tanks. And we know for a fact that his benefactors, his patrons, are Israelis, right? His legal fees have been paid by Israelis, by Zionists, and the English Defense League, which doesn't exist anymore, but he used to be associated with it, is closely related to the Jewish Defense League, which is a Zionist organization. So, he is openly taking photographs, posing with a genocidal army. Not now, but when has it not been genocidal? And again, this guy calls himself an English patriot, supposedly, right? And he puts on a T-shirt of the IDF when the Israelis are responsible for the deadliest terrorist attack against British subjects in history. How can you be an English patriot and then you celebrate an army that has killed more British subjects in a terrorist attack than anyone in history? What kind of a patriot are you? So he goes on Israeli TV. He goes on Israeli television. Okay, this is in the last 2 days, and he admits that all of these riots, these pogroms, are related to October 7, basically admitting that, well, he doesn't like that people are protesting against genocide. So we know that he is paid by Israel, or at least his benefactors are Israelis. Okay, he's posing in IDF merchandise alongside the IDF on occupied soil in Palestine, and then advancing an Israeli agenda, which is Islamophobia, which is anti-Arab racism. Because you have to understand, the Israelis, they need anti-Arab racism, they need Islamophobia in the UK, in the West, so they can keep saying, oh my God, we are surrounded by terrorists, we need your money and your guns, please. They need that. Okay, so listen to him on Israeli TV, all right?
Right now, we have had jihad attacks every year for 15 years.
A jihad attack. What is a jihad attack? What is that? What is that?
What we've seen since October the 7th is the takeover of our capital city every single week by pro-Hamas, pro-jihadi groups who are encouraging hatred on our streets. And the problem's been...
I mean, just take the text that he's saying, what's coming out of his mouth. Remove the name, remove the accent that he's putting on, and you can... It sounds indistinguishable from an Israeli. Absolutely, utterly indistinguishable. Indistinguishable. Right? Just throw the words in there, the magic words, jihadi, Islamic, Islamist, Muslimanic, all the key words, the buzzwords, right? Which don't really mean anything.
They're unchallenged by the police.
The people have taken part.
They're unchallenged by the police. Really? Is that why European police forces are banning anyone who opens their mouths and arresting even Jews, right? Who say they're against genocide all across Europe? Is that why they've prescribed Hamas as a supposed terrorist organization? Really, they're doing nothing. Really, you see, like a Zionist, he self-victimizes. He makes up some fantasy that doesn't exist in reality, and despite all the evidence, makes it out to be, oh yeah, we are the victims.
In a far-right protest in central London this afternoon, led by activist Tommy Robinson.
Should
הרשויות בבריטניה מאשימות את האיש הזה שהצית את הכל, פעיל הימין טומי רובינסון, מייסד תנועת הימין נגד מהגרים בשם הליגה להגנת אנגליה. משרד הפנים הבריטי אפילו קורא להגדיר את ה-EDL כארגון טרור. רובינסון מגיב ברעיון בלעדי לצינור.
They're trying to put the blame for this at my door. When the locals took to the streets in anger.
Well, no one is trying to put the blame on his door. He's literally been inciting this stuff for the last couple of days. Okay, so to come here and pretend like he has nothing to do with it, I mean, this is hilarious. So I'm going to tell you what a hypocrite this guy is. He claims he's an English patriot and then wears an IDF t-shirt and changes his name because it sounds Irish and he wants it to sound English. He complains about immigrants. And then he himself is an immigrant in Spain. He doesn't even live in England. He is an immigrant who lives in Spain. He complains about illegals and is convicted of, this guy is convicted of having entered the United States illegally on a fake passport. He went to prison for that. Again, let me repeat that. Tommy Robinson, Yaxley Lennon, whatever his name is, Paul Harris, I don't know, he has 5-6 different names, was convicted of entering the United States illegally on a fake passport. And then he turns around and complains about quote unquote illegals in the UK. What he means are asylum seekers, which is the most legal thing under international law. Every single human being on the planet has a human right to apply for asylum. That's a fact. You can dislike it, but it's a fact. It's not illegal. It's utterly, completely, unequivocally legal. Okay? Unlike Tommy Robinson's, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Paul Harris's behavior. All right? And then he talks about, oh, we have to leave the European Union. We have to have Brexit. And then he goes and lives in the European Union. Is there anything this guy does that is not hypocritical? He is a walking hypocrite. He's the epitome, you know, of a hypocrite. It's truly unbelievable, right? And then he and his ilk talk about refugees who are victims of British foreign policy, victims of Western imperialism. They call them invaders. And then he goes and poses with invaders, with the Israeli army, who are illegally occupying 3 countries. Invaders in every sense of the word. I mean, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. It's stinking. It's so Israeli. It's that exact projection that we keep talking about, that Israeli projection, the Zionist projection. He embodies it, right? It's amazing. It really is. What could he be but a Zionist, right? What could he be except a Zionist? So this is from David Miller, who's done also excellent work. And he says here, is Tommy Robinson, in quotation marks, a Zionist asset? Liberal Russophobes are uncomfortable with the idea that he is a Zionist asset, partly because of their own Judeophilia. So how do they explain that his legal fees have been paid by the Middle East Forum, a US-based think tank, which is in reality a cutout for the Mossad? Or the many other Zionist tributaries to his financial support. They are also well known, and they have been reported on in The Guardian. And then David Miller also goes on to talk about how the state of Israel is burning down the UK, right? So he basically he quotes the clip I just played to you, okay? And then here also he talks about the strategy here. So why is this happening? Number one, these pogroms are happening in the UK right now to punish the average British citizen, especially minorities, for protesting against genocide, right? You want to come out, Tommy Robinson is essentially saying that. You want to come out every week and say you don't like genocide? Okay, we're going to come burn down the mosque. We're going to beat you up in the street because you're a shade darker than I am. By the way, I think he opened a tanning salon, which is very funny for someone who doesn't like brown people. I mean, the hypocrisy on this guy is so funny. There's not a thing in his life that isn't a hypocrisy. It's unbelievable. You couldn't make this stuff up, I swear. And then the second part of the strategy here is punish the Labour government over its empty posturing over banning arms sales to the state of Israel. So what does that mean? Recently, the British government said they're going to challenge the ICC's jurisdiction, right? So they can basically oppose the application for an arrest warrant against Netanyahu. That's the idea, right? Stall the ICC. Come up with some reason so we don't have to arrest Netanyahu if he comes to the UK. And the Labour government now under Keir Starmer dropped that. They dropped this legal challenge to the ICC, okay, over its jurisdiction. It doesn't mean anything because they're still giving weapons to Israel, so they're still supporting the genocide. As David Miller Professor Miller correctly puts it, it's empty posturing. But nevertheless, the Israelis don't take it that way. Anything short of absolute total subordination
is considered treacherous and anti-Semitism, and they'll come up with a million names and ways to describe it. But basically, Zionists cannot tolerate this. Even if it's empty posturing, it's still against their interests and their image. They'll punish you for it. So they want to punish the average British citizen for protesting against genocide. They want to punish the empty, garbage position of Labour government. And finally, this is to make an example out of England for other European countries and other Western countries. If you keep on opening your mouths about what we're doing in Gaza, if you try to subvert us, even in, just rhetorically or in an empty manner, we'll come after you. We will turn your country upside down. We will burn it to the ground. Now, I need to remind you something, that the Israelis lie about everything. The Israelis are committing a genocide. If you're committing a genocide, does a pogrom seem that far-fetched? Does a pogrom seem far-fetched for someone who commits genocide? Of course not. They're one and the same. They go together. They go hand in hand, right? Someone who commits genocide is absolutely capable of committing a pogrom. This is not a big deal. It takes far less resources. It's undercover. It's done, indirectly. But nevertheless, we can see all the breadcrumbs. This guy is very clearly a Zionist asset. He's proudly taken a photo with the IDF. What more do you need? They're bankrolling him. What more do you need? Okay, and even if he wasn't, this behavior is utterly disgusting, and it only benefits the Israelis. It only benefits the Israelis. So this is really something that is that needs to be looked into. And Loki also here posted how the English Defense League, okay, so basically they changed it to English and Jewish Defense League. Okay, if you look at the company registers, you'll find that they're the same thing. And you should note that the Jewish Defense League is prescribed as a terrorist organization in the United States, right? That's what's so ironic about all of this. And I'll remind you of something else, because not only is this man a hypocrite, he is also, and not just him, I'm talking about all of these people in the streets, these hooligans, these thugs, these delinquents, these racists, these, people that are coming out and thinking that violence is acceptable. They constantly talk about immigrants as not respecting the law, right? Well, how come he fled the country? Again, just to make this absolutely clear, okay? This man, the Zionist asset that we're talking about, okay? Yaxley Lennon, right? Tommy Robinson, Paul Harris, whatever his name is. He fled the United Kingdom just a few days ago. He was supposed to go to court for contempt of court because the court told him a few years ago not to show a film where he lied about a Syrian refugee, and he went and broadcast it anyway. So the court said, you have to come in and, we're charging you with contempt of court. He fled the country. He left via the Eurotunnel. This is just a few days ago. How can someone call themselves an English patriot and they have such disregard and contempt for the law, for the organs, the judicial system of the country? Explain that one to me. Explain it. I understand to describe it as unfair and so on, but to flee the country, I mean, unless you're persecuted, which is something entirely, but this man is not. And what's ironic is that you have to note the cooperation of the state. So forget why he fled or the fact that he fled. I'm going to show you the state's role in this. There's a judge that issued an arrest warrant for him. Okay, and I was reading through this and I recognized the name of the judge because I've been covering the Assange case for a couple of years. Right, it's the same judge, Justice Johnson. I immediately recognized the name. And the funny thing is, the arrest warrant is not active. So he issued an arrest warrant, but it doesn't come into effect until October. Have you ever heard of such a thing? There's a warrant out for someone's arrest, but it's not in effect for a couple of months. What kind of an arrest warrant is that? So I find this incredible for several reasons. Because if you look at Julian Assange is a journalist. He didn't incite riots in the country. He didn't, say racist things or publish racist things or lie about people. He is an upstanding citizen, an Australian citizen in the UK, residing peacefully, doing his job as a journalist, speaking truth to power. They wouldn't allow him bail. His health was failing. They wouldn't allow him bail. They wouldn't allow him house arrest. No mercy whatsoever. Never. I mean, leaving the country on top of it. That's amazing. That is amazing. Can you imagine that? Assange was literally politically persecuted. He applied for asylum and they demonized him, and they still demonize him. Oh, you're running away from justice. When the guy, I'm sorry, man, when a foreign country is giving you political asylum, there's some substance to it. It's not made up. Okay? So he did it by the book with the law, and they still treated him like he's a criminal. This guy literally flees the country on the eve of his court date, runs away after inciting riots. You know, like, no, the judges just give him an inactive arrest warrant. That's amazing. And I'll tell you another thing also. I'll tell you something else. What's also funny is that while he was trying to leave the country, they tried to search him. He refused, and then they arrested him under the Counterterrorism Act, which, again, I'm against the Counterterrorism Act. We all know what it is. I've talked about it before. It's, you know, it's authoritarian and archaic. But nevertheless, they arrested him. So they obviously saw that he has a court date the next day, and he gets bail and then leaves the country. So just in conclusion, he's given bail, he's allowed to leave the country, he's issued an arrest warrant that is inactive. I mean, how can you look at that and not call that preferential treatment? How can you look at that, given this guy's behavior and who he is, and not suspect that there is some foul play, some foul crap going on here? I sense that the Israelis pressured the British government to let this guy flee. That's just my sentiment. Again, it's just conjecture. I'm just speculating. It's not like we need any more things to show that he's an Israeli asset. We already know he is. He very clearly is, right? The photo speaks for itself. But and he speaks for himself. His language is pure Israeli, pure Zionist. So, you know, these people are scum. I mean, these people are utter, absolute scum. Okay. And Keir Starmer is equally responsible, because when Keir Starmer was absent, the Home Secretary was absent, the police, the army were absent. It's because of Keir Starmer sending them off, you know, distracting them with genocide in Gaza. Go and support the Israeli war effort. You know, let riots happen in England, whatever. Let's not send the army. Let's not send the police. Just let the riots happen, even if, you know, mosques or hotels are burnt down. And the same thing can be said of Rishi Sunak and Priti Patel and Suella Braverman and all these politicians before, because for years they've been demonizing people that are brown, people that are Muslim, people that are Asian, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, you name it. Even though Suella Braverman, Priti Patel and Rishi Sunak themselves are children of immigrants, right? They are themselves children of immigrants, and yet they demonize immigrants. Keir Starmer, what did he say recently? He's saying, you know, he's talking about sending people from Bangladesh back to Bangladesh. I mean, this is... It's extraordinarily racist, right? And these people, they call themselves, you know, British patriots. I'm sorry, the United Kingdom cannot be in the United Nations and call itself a civilized country and you know, be a signatory, as a matter of fact, an author of the Refugee Convention, and then treat refugees who are victims of British foreign policy like this. You know, being so people are fleeing bombs, British bombs. They come for, you know, they flee to Britain for safety, and then we try to burn them down again. I mean, what kind of decadent, uncivilized barbarism is this? Don't come to me and talk about, you know, illegal immigrants destroying the country when you yourself are going out and destroying the country, behaving like a hooligan, behaving like some, you know, decadent thug, and pulverizing your own community. Don't talk to me about the country has been taken over. It has been taken over by Zionists, by people like this, okay? By Zionists. You're right. In that sense, it has been taken over by the Israelis and their agents like Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson, Paul Harris, whatever his name is, okay? You know, you're going to come here and talk about asylum seekers taking up money and space and resources. I'm sorry, there's far more money being spent on bombs and wars, okay, and sanctions, which created the refugees in the first place. The same people that are saying, oh, we have to take things into our own hands now, which is basically, they're basically saying, I can behave like a vigilante. You know, I'm going to take the law into my own hands. I'm going to burn people down. I'm going to, you know, attack them. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to be a thug. These people then turn around and call Palestinians terrorists when they fight against Israeli colonizers. The difference is that looting and hooliganism and attempted murder are illegal, whereas Palestinian armed struggle is absolutely and perfectly legal. So who's the terrorist? Okay, who is the terrorist? Again, you want to talk about illegal immigrants? This guy literally entered the United States with a fake passport. I mean, the hypocrisy is rank. No one is more illegal than American troops on foreign soil. No one is more illegal than British spy planes buzzing over Gaza or French troops occupying Africa. Okay, Those people you're calling immigrants are refugees. They're running away from our mess. We bombed their homes. We killed their friends. We killed their families. We left them jobless. We destroyed their economies. We destroyed them with sanctions. We looted and robbed their resources for centuries, thieving to the point they can't recover and stand up on their own 2 feet. We kept drilling this into their heads, how the white man is so much better. And now that they want to come over and take a look and see where their money went, you put up a wall. If only there was a wall to stop your thieving ass 300 years ago. If only. The same people whining about migrants, they want Arabs to tolerate Israeli invaders. These are people with weapons, with tanks, with nuclear bombs, and they encourage British Jews or European Jews to leave the country because they're so anti-Semitic. They want them to just leave the country and go to Palestine and emigrate on top of somebody else's land and give them bombs too. Christ, I mean, double standard is really, is really an understatement. You want to stop people from exercising their right under international law to seek asylum? Fine, but don't turn around then and lecture the world about human rights the next morning, all right? And don't talk to me about securing our borders. Our borders are perfectly fine. We have nuclear weapons. We have one of the best navies in the world. It's Arab borders that need securing from us, okay? It's African borders that need securing from the West. The top 3 countries that produce refugees are Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. All of these countries have one thing in common. They've been bombed and destroyed by NATO. All right. The West invaded and destroyed these countries. How bizarre that Tommy Robinson / Stephen Yaxley Lennon / Paul Harris / Israeli Zionist name won't mention any of this. The far right in France, in Britain, in America won't mention sanctions bombs that create the refugees that they keep whining about so much. If you're so worried about foreigners coming to the country, then stop bombing people, stop stealing their resources, stop being an imperialist little shit, and mind your business, all right? Otherwise, you can fuck off and shut your damn mouth. And thank your lucky stars, by the way, that these refugees you demonize so much are innocent, decent human beings who aren't vengeful little gobshites like yourself. So, absolutely, they are going to try and clamp down on people's freedom of speech. But again, make no mistake that, what we saw in the last couple of days were racist pogroms. And the irony here is that they were claiming for months that, oh my God, these people who are protesting against genocide, how dare they? And peacefully marching, these are hate marchers. They're supporting terrorism. They're anti-Semites. And then when you look at this behavior, who is supporting terrorism? Who is acting out terrorism? I mean, when you're attacking the police with bricks, with bottles, when you're trying to burn down refugees who have already escaped British bombs and American bombs overseas, only to come to England and then try, be attacked again. Even one person who used to work counterterrorism went on the BBC and said this is crossing the line into terrorism. Now, again, I don't trust the motives of the security state of MI5 and MI6 because they want any excuse just to clamp down on people's freedom, but they were doing that anyway. Months ago, they said, oh my God, people who say anything good about the resistance are terrorists. So they've been doing this for a long time. It's not the far right are not victims. On the contrary, it's the far right that is in government. Keir Starmer, the Labour Party, are far right. The Conservatives are far right. Democrats, Republicans are far right. They, check every single box. They make all sorts of remarks, derogatory remarks about people protesting for Palestine. But when you look at how the people behaved in the last couple of days of these pogroms, they embody all of these smears and slurs, about being violent and being hateful and being racist. I mean, what is that? Did you see anyone trying to burn down a synagogue during the last months? Did you see people walking up to someone who is clearly Jewish and then beating them up because they're Jewish? No one has done that. No one in the pro-Palestine camp would dream of even doing that, and yet they were smeared by the media. And when we see black people, Asians, Muslims, Arabs being, almost lynched in the street, or call it whatever you want, punched, scuffled, I really don't care. They were attacked. When we see this behavior happening, the media call it, anti-immigration protests or unrest. Jesus, I mean, come on. What a double standard, really. What a double standard. So anyway, I just thought I'd point out this hypocrisy.
like me, Jackie Walker was witch hunted out of the Labour Party, and I, for one, am glad to be out of it. 20 years now, 21 years I've been out of it. She, a little less long, but she has never stopped fighting for what she believes in. Jackie Walker, the activist and writer, joins me now on the mother of all talk shows. Jackie, thanks for coming on. These are very troubled times. They haven't reached London yet. We can't be certain that they won't, but in the northern towns that I know so well, the situation is very grim. Tens of thousands of people are living in fear and have every reason to doubt that the police, that the state will be able to protect them from marauding people who are attacking others purely and simply because of how they look, the color of their skin. They say they're after Muslims, but they're attacking non-Muslim black people. They're attacking Sikhs. They're attacking anybody of color. And it's now the third night of that. I'm not sure we've seen this before, at least not since the Notting Hill riots of the early 60s, but this is on a much bigger scale. What say you?
I think this is a phenomenon, but it is a phenomenon, I think, that many of us have predicted for quite a long time. I mean, those of us who've got our eyes open politically knew it was coming and what was coming. But what is extraordinary at this point is how quickly it has happened since Starmer became the Prime Minister. And what is stunning is his lack of response. And the fact that when it did come, 3 days really after it all kicked off, it was in a way so weak. He still can't really bring the words racism out of his mouth. He certainly can't use the word term Islamophobia, because he himself and his party and his spokespeople have been actually stoking this fire that threatens to consume so much of what we should find valuable about British culture.
It has been the most miserable performance. I mean, not since Liz Truss and the famous lettuce, which outlived her premiership, has there been a more unimpressive response to basically an unprecedented level of racialized violence, which then became terror with the fire that was started in the hotel in Rotherham. I mean, you would think that Starmer would at least have been advised to get on the television, not on the third night with his bags packed for his holiday and his mealy-mouthed monotone, which neither pacified the rioters, the racist thugs, nor reassured the people who are their victims.
I mean, this is when we see the true caliber of this person and his real lack of experience and the awfulness of the group of people who are advising him. They haven't got a clue. And they haven't got a clue about what they have started. Because, you know, what's happening now, quite rightly, is that many people in the minority communities, and this is not just about Muslims, by the way, are now saying we need to get organized to defend ourselves. And also, everything that we saw from the film that was going on in Rotherham and in other places seemed to show that the police were actually outnumbered. I mean, what is going on here? And you cannot believe that this would be happening if the actual focus wasn't people of color and Muslims. There would have been something done, because what you have here on show is the structural racism, not just behind the political class, but the media class in Britain. So how it's being reported in Britain is this two-sidism, you know, that you've got protesters on one side and protesters on another side. What you've got are fascists who are trying to burn people to death, who are smashing people's homes, who are smashing people's cars when their families are in it, who are beating up people and are stabbing people. That's what you have on one side. And on the other side, you have minorities who are the victims. And yet the media is still reporting it as this two-sidism. It's totally, utterly shocking.
Actually, the BBC described it in a bulletin earlier this evening as pro-Britain protesters, which is a new twist on matters. You're too young to remember, of course, but I faced phalanxes of police during the miners' strike in 84, 85, much bigger police than we nowadays usually see. And my impression was the same as yours. Here are a few hundred thugs. We're not talking thousands for the most part. Here are a few hundred thugs putting the police to flight, hurting the police, harming the police. Where are all the police? And if we don't have enough police to protect our communities, we bloody well better get far more of them very quickly indeed, or otherwise people will have to defend themselves. Then you will have two-sidedness. And then we're on the way to hell in a handcart, Jackie.
Totally. I'm afraid I'm not so young. I mean, I was in my 20s when the miners' strike was going on, and we were collecting money for the miners when I was a student. So I was kind of involved in that way. And I also remember, and I'm sure you remember, what happened at New Cross when the racists and fascists tried to walk down through my area, and they were seen off. Not by the police, by the way, not by the police at all, but by militant community anti-racists. And that is what's happening now. In fact, the protection of minorities and of communities is not really happening by the police. It's happening by communities coming together. But this is also complex, isn't it? Because I think this is also linked to what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Israel. I think it's what's happening and what's happened at parliamentary level. It is a huge, complex issue that's going on now. And we won't see the end of it, even if it was to finish in a day or two's time. Because as we know, another thing that some of us prophesied 4 years ago, I was saying that the black wall, what we call the black wall, would fall, i.e. the black vote that supports Labour would go. And in this election, we saw a third of minority voters not voting Labour. That is absolutely astonishing. And I think what we're going to see now is a real realignment in politics.
Well, this is all the product of what they used to call, now they're not so keen on calling it this, centrism, isn't it? It's the prevailing socio-economic and cultural outlook of a succession of centrist governments from John Major until this day. We have people who have left the north, the coastal communities, the abandoned towns, the rundown cities, places like Hull, places like Stoke, places like Rotherham. It's all dry tinder, Jackie, and all because of the failure of successive neoliberal governments, whatever party they claimed that they represented.
And it's carrying on now. I'm sure you, like I, felt almost sick when at the beginning of Parliament, we saw the Labour and Tory leaders kind of congratulating each other because it was just a handover of power. In a way, we have a one-party state here because economically, they kind of agree. Socially, they kind of agree. All of their policies are pretty much the same. All that the Labour Party is doing is offering to give you conservative policies just a bit more efficiently. But what we did see in this election was their lowest popular vote for a government that's actually in power. And that's why I'm saying, I think given what's happening now so early, given what has happened recently with the withdrawal of the pensioners' fuel allowance, given what's going to go on financially when they continue these neoconservative monetary policies, I think we're going to have a very interesting next election and a realignment.
If we get there, unless the world blows up in between. Jackie Walker, right?
Cool, Phil. Follow me.